This is hit hard to deep right field. And Jimenez has hit it out. An absolute bolt off the bat of Andres Jimenez. His 4th home run of the season, and the Blue Jays are out in front.
Hit high in the air into right center, and that one's going to carry into the bullpen. Alejandro Kirk beams up a 2-run homer. Yikes.
That's to the backstop. And here comes Kirk as it bounces way up the first base line, and another run scores. Jimenez to second. It's 10-6.
Alongside Alex and T-Bone on BK, you got BK and Ferrario here on 101 ESPN. That is what it sounded like last night. Cardinals lose that one 10-9 against the Toronto Blue Jays. Alex, we'll get to the good that came from that game here in about 10 minutes or so. But we've got to start with the bad, and it's the pitching, man. You gave up 10 runs. You're probably not going to win that game. I think we talked about this last night. We all got together, grabbed a couple of drinks together. That was great to see you boys out past 2 o'clock.
This was a nightmare.
The Cardinals win when they score at least 9 runs in the Ollie Marmol era. I believe it's 55-4 is their record overall. Last night being the 4th loss that they had in such a scenario.
Of course you have that stat.
You don't expect to lose those games, right? You think if you score 9, I feel pretty good going in to believe, yeah, you're going to find a way to win. Unfortunately, last night they didn't. And it's the pitching that does them in. Michaelis, not a great start for him. Balls in play all the time. You knew that was at least possible. That was in the range of outcomes for him. But then it's your bullpen as well. John King was fine. Kyle Leahy, once again, giving up way too many hits. Just all the contact in the world. And then Roycroft didn't look good again, including that wild pitch. It was basically strikeout, hit, strikeout, hit, strikeout, hit. It's just not... It's not what you're looking for from him. So ultimately, the pitching was the problem. Here's Ollie Marmol talking after the game about this matchup with the Blue Jays and how it really exposes some of the Cardinals' weaknesses in that area.
This might be one of our toughest series. This might be a tougher series for us as far as matchup goes than even LA, just because of the amount of contact this group makes and what we do as a pitching staff, right? So we knew there would be challenges. We'd have to navigate, and they're continuing to show that they're first in the league at being the toughest to strike out, a ton of contact, and a lot of it has gone their way. You look at the BABIP today, you're looking at almost a 350 clip, which is outrageous, but it's part of what they do, part of the ball and play game. You're going to have to live and die by it.
So the Cardinals, you mentioned 350 BABIP. BABIP is batting average on balls in play. So when the ball is put into play, what is the average? Typically around the league, you expect somewhere around 300. It's kind of what you expect. Now, that's different. Like a line drive that's hit 105 miles an hour off the bat is different than a ground ball that's hit 75 miles an hour.
You went too far, man. You had me, and you went too far.
Okay, basically, they're getting unlucky.
Thank you.
They're getting a little unlucky right now. I'm glad you mentioned that, honestly.
Geometry.
Didn't need the nerdy numbers.
I know. They have been getting unlucky in that regard for about 2 weeks. Since May 30th, the Cardinals pitching staff overall, starters plus relievers, have a 5.5 ERA, which is 26th in Major League Baseball. The only teams that are below you, this is interesting, Colorado and Sacramento, Oakland, the Ace. Also, Minnesota, who had the best pitching staff in baseball for like a month, is down there
just
below
like
you.
They went on a tear.
And the Yankees, who have a 6.5 ERA over the course of the last 2 weeks. So a weird grouping of teams. Phillies are right above you as well. Again, they were one of the best pitching teams in baseball for a while, too. Pitching's weird. Alex, I'm asking all of this. I'm mentioning all of this. We're 2 minutes in. Now I'll go ahead and ask you the question. Is the pitching good enough to keep this team in the race until July 31st? Because that, to me, is the question more so than keeping them into October. Because if you're in it on July 31st, you could go get reinforcements. Do they have enough to get them there?
I don't think the pitching does, no. But I think the offense has enough to keep you in it if your pitching doesn't. You're going to see some games like you saw yesterday to where, it's 10-6 and you're thinking this game's done, but the offense pulls you back into it. I think the pitching right now is starting to showcase some of the cracks in the foundation. Like Miles Michaelis has had 3 starts that just have not been very pretty. Fetty has had okay starts, but it's the John Gant method where it's like, oh, you escaped from this one. Palante, the same. Like your pitching right now is putting yourself in a position to where in the second or third inning, you're thinking, boy, this game might get ugly quick. And they find themselves, they throw that smoke bomb and they disappear. But the offense, regardless of what the score is, it gives you a shot to stay in this. So July 31st is the benchmark that you're going towards. I don't think the pitching is good enough to keep you into this one. I think the pitching is going to start regressing to this level because of the competition you're going up against and because the pitch to contact isn't as effective as the swing and miss stuff. Plus, you're talking about the middle of the season where some of the wear and tear kicks in. But with me saying that I don't think the pitching is good enough to get you to July 31st and still be in this, I also kind of argue against myself and say the offense, though, is good enough to make good on your pitching faltering.
Here are some of the teams that you'll face prior to July 31st. I think the context on this is noteworthy. Miami is right before the deadline. Colorado is beginning the second half of the season as well. Beyond that, you'll see Atlanta. You think about their offense, and you're like, oh, potent offense, you got to worry about them. No, hasn't been that this year. Washington has not been a great team. Pittsburgh has one of the most feeble offenses in Major League Baseball. Cincinnati is just okay. The Chicago White Sox, they're not good at all. And you've got Milwaukee coming up. So if I'm trying to be optimistic about the pitching staff, some of this is, man, you've just run into some really good offenses lately. Mm-hmm. Now, set aside the Royals, but...
and the Rangers.
Well, yeah, okay. So lately, the last 5 games, you've gone up against some really good offenses, especially Toronto. This is a great offense. We talked about this going into the series. I thought people were way overlooking what Toronto was capable of. I don't think Chicago, Cincinnati, Cleveland, Pittsburgh, Atlanta, these teams aren't going to do to your pitching staff what the Blue Jays have done to your pitching staff. It might not look good in some of those individual games, but I'm not overly concerned about it. I think you can still be average to below average, and with the offense that Alex brought up, I think that might be good enough to keep you in it until July 31st.
Yeah, I think the pitching will be able to keep you in it. Now, I kind of agree with Alex where I would lean more towards this, probably actually the offense, but because the schedule that you mentioned, and I've talked about this before, right? I thought their elite defense, at least they were elite in the first month, and they've been good since then, but they haven't been where they were in the first month of the season, that would help kind of prevent some of this regression. It was going to happen. They were going to regress a little bit, but not to the mark that we've seen, to where you've seen the ERA inflate up towards 26th, you said, in this most recent stretch. That kind of changes my tone a little bit on where we are at with this team. But to get to July 31st and still be in this, yes, that they can do. When you are talking bigger picture and you're saying, hey, like, what if they didn't add an arm at the deadline? I'd go, well, now I'm a little skeptical that we're going to be able to get through this through October, because you're living on the BABIP game right now, and it is really coming to them. I still think there are going to be series, like you read off some of those opponents. Sure. I agree. Those aren't good offenses. Neither was Texas, right? Neither were the Royals. There are going to still be series when the guys don't have their stuff and you still get hit around a little bit. But I don't think this is a team that's going to consistently drop like 2 or 3 to the Chicago White Sox, 2 or 3 to the Rockies, the Marlins. Like, that's not going to happen.
Texas has heated up, by the way. They just scored 16 runs yesterday.
What a cherry picks down. One day. One day.
It's one day, man.
They scored 9 runs in the final 2 games of the series against Washington. Don't ask me about the other.
0.
Yep. Their offense is getting a little better.
Did they win the series or did they not win the series?
Texas did.
There you go.
The Cardinals did not, but...
Oh, well, we know that.
Yeah, it didn't go super well there, and it has not gone super well in the first 2 games of this series. One other thing that I did want to mention on the pitching side of things, man, you're really missing that last chase reliever, as Derek Gould just called it, the pitcher that comes in when you're down by 2 or 3 runs. You don't want to bring in your high leverage guys in those spots. You're not trying to bring in Maton. You're not bringing in Helsley in that situation, but this is where you get your Roy Croft and John King, and at times it's Kyle Leahy's job to kind of keep things close there. Roy Croft last night, that spot in your bullpen, man, would you like to have an upgrade over him? And there's Andre Granillo, who down in the AAA status right now. He has thrown 30 innings, and he has 46 strikeouts with only 8 walks.
Hell yeah.
That's not ready for the major leagues.
I'm sorry, man, but I can't continue to look at this and be like, oh, can't find a spot for him. I'm watching this bullpen on a night in, night out basis, and there's a spot for that guy in your pen. You're severely lacking swing and miss stuff. I don't know what it would look like at the big league level. I don't, but I've seen this Roy Croft thing, and the stuff looks good, and it's just not working. I would like to see them make that switch. It would require a 40-man move.
Welcome
it
to the
probably
problem.
requires you doing one of 2 things. Either saying goodbye to Jose Fermin, which we know this team cannot do. They can't possibly let him go. Or you do a paper move first, and you put Semra Bursay onto the 26-man roster to then put him onto the 60-day IL, which requires him to be paid at the major league level.
You're talking about spending money.
Yep. He gets paid a major league salary minimum for the rest of the season, so you'd have to pay him, and he accrues all of that service time, so there's those two issues, but then you could call up Andre Granillo.
The wallet is empty.
Yeah, look,
we can't afford
the
that.
problem isn't finding a spot for Granillo in the bullpen. Everybody knows that he's got a spot in there right now. The problem is there's a spot on the 40-man roster, and those just don't come by very often.
Yeah,
for
the
this
314 mentions. He's not on the 40-man, BK. I know.
Yeah, it can't happen, BK.
I mean,
I'm with you, though.
You need swing and miss. You need a stopper. It's not the closer. It's not the eighth, the setup guy. You need a stopper when things are about to go from bad to worse. Swanson was in that role a few games ago where it got ugly when the Cardinals were like,
worse.
Let's get into this. Got worse. That's where the exhaustion sets in on your offense, where it's like, man, can we just please stop the bleeding?
And if Chris Roycroft doesn't have a wild pitch, you tie the game in the ninth inning.
Yep.
Yeah, that's what's frustrating is like you had it. You had the opportunity. It was right there for you. Wilson Contreras connects. Boom. You should have tied the game. And instead, you're still sitting there down by a run because of that wild pitch by Chris Roycroft.
But I'm with you. Like, we've done the Roycroft experience. We've done the Munoz experience. To me, those ships should sail. Like, you've seen it. It's not going to get any better, and I'm not trying to take shots at these guys, but we've done this Memphis train a couple of times, and they've come up and the same problem has been there. It's not changing, so now you need to start putting new faces into that roster.
He's Alex. That's T-Bone on BK. 314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line to get involved in the show. YouTube chat is available for you at youtube.com/101ESPN STL. We're going to be talking with Jeremy Rutherford, our Blues insider, at 11:30. Chris Kerber joining us at 12 o'clock, a little earlier today. He's going to the Cardinals game later on, so he's going to join us today in the 12 o'clock hour. But coming up next, that's all the negative from last night. There was some positive despite the loss. We'll talk about that coming up next year on 101 ESPN.
deserve a win. And a high, towering fly ball deep center. Miles Straw back. That baby's gone. Contreras with a big-time bomb to straightaway center. Ambushes the first pitch and makes it a one-run game.
And now a ground ball to second off the bat of Burleson, and the Blue Jays will hang on to win it here tonight in a wild game that probably aged a lot of people in that third base dugout quite a bit tonight. Boy, they had to fight right to the finish to hang on, Caleb, but they win the game 10-9.
That's what it sounded like. First, that highlight courtesy of FanDuel Sports Midwest. The second highlight courtesy of Sportsnet up in Canada. Alex, Dan Schulman described exactly what you want to hear if you're a Cardinals fan. If you're going to lose a game, and yes, text line, I understand. You want to win all 162 of them. Guess what? It's not going to happen. People get very mad when I'm like, there was a positive in the loss last night. Yes, that can happen from time to time. Last night was one of those games. You scored 9 runs. You scored 9 runs in the game. You lost. That sucks. It's brutal. But you found a way to come back once again. And there was a really good note earlier today in the St. Louis Post-Dispatch, one of their articles wrapping up last night's game. While producing one of Major League Baseball's top offenses, the Cardinals finished Tuesday's game ranked 5th in average and 8th in on-base plus slugging percentage when behind in a game. They are a top 8 offense in Major League Baseball when they are trailing. They are similar in that regard to the Cubs, Mets, and Dodgers. This offense, Alex, is giving you every opportunity to come back in these games. I felt this last night once again, where you get into a big spot and you're like, man, I don't know if they're going to win, but I do think they're going to make this thing close again. And they found a way. They pushed the closer into the game. Like Ollie mentioned it after the LA Dodgers series, and he's 100% correct. The Dodgers felt the Cardinals in every second of that game. Mm-hmm. And the same thing has been true so far in the Toronto Blue Jays series. Now, the Cardinals are 0 for 2, and ultimately that's what matters. You've got to start winning some of these games. You can't just keep coming close, keep putting pressure on the opposition. No, eventually you have to win, and that's where you're going to be judged. But for this young of a team to come up with this kind of competitive at-bats consistently late in baseball games, that is a huge deal, and it is something that they can continue to build off of.
Would you say that they're youngry, BK? The offense is youngry?
I would say that is the way they would describe themselves, yes.
Look, this is the best case scenario for the Cardinals, and I know people don't like to hear that, but when your offense, which to me was the biggest question mark going into this season, because when you got rid of Goldschmidt, the 2 guys that were MVPs for you, carrying your team for 3 or 4 years in Arenado and Goldschmidt, declined or gone. Where's your offense coming from? This is the best case scenario if you're the Cardinals, because now you've got answers on a lot of these guys. Now, is there going to be some regression? Absolutely. But you are seeing the clutch factor, because last night, you're absolutely correct, BK. This Ferrario version last year for the Cardinals, I'm turning that game off the moment the Toronto Blue Jays scored 2 runs in the 5th inning, because that game's over. They're not coming back. But this was a game that was like, yeah, I could see it. And this is where, like, they come up with the clutch performance, and it doesn't matter where. Like, look, Nolan Arenado gets that home run last night to spark the team a little bit. Then Wilson Contreras does it for you. It doesn't matter where they're at. They've got an opportunity to put up 8, 9, 10 runs. And that is the best case scenario, because they needed answers on what their offense was going to be. If they end this season to where, look, we've got 4 or 5 guys that are performers for us. Like, we think we've got budding stars in our roster right now. Cool, man. We can go out there and find areas to fill the voids of, like, our pitching needs more swing and miss stuff. We need a little bit more stuff at the top end of our rotation or the back end of our bullpen. If you go into the offseason and don't have any budding stars, a bunch of guys who are good defensively and can make contact, you've got a lot more problems. So this was huge for the Cardinals. Even if you lost, you felt like you had a chance to win the game.
And T-Bone, like, one of the things that I would point to, look at the pitching last night. Michaelis, King, Roycroft, out of those 3, I think the over-under would be set at 0.5 on the roster in 2026. Like, I don't know if any of them are going to be here next year. Yeah. I would say the likelihood is maybe 1, maybe. And those are the reasons that you lost last night. The pitching was why you lost. On the hitting side of things, you look at the lineup: Wynn, Herrera, Donovan, Contreras, Burleson, Gorman, Paje, Scott. I would say it's very likely at least 7 of those 8 will be back next season. At least 7 of them. I don't know on Arenado, maybe one way or the other, but Arenado, like at this point, probably is going to be around next season as well. So it might have been 8 of your 9 players in your lineup from yesterday's game will be back again next year. That's what matters. What you're trying to learn, like we've talked a lot about the playoffs and what this season can become and what they're capable of. And so much of that is not only about getting to the playoffs this year and like trying to push, but also what that means for you in 2026, setting yourself up the way that the Blues have for expectations to continue to rise, right? Well, a big part of those expectations, whether they make the playoffs or not, is finding out what you have in these young players and them producing at the major league level. And man, like honestly, what Michaelis does is not all that important. What Eric Fetty does this year, not all that important. If we're being totally honest, what Ryan Helsley does this year, only important if you end up trading him at the deadline or if you really care about getting to the playoffs. The stuff that matters is the guys that are going to be around long term. Matthew Liberatore, what he's doing today really matters. Andre Palante, what he is doing to adjust at the major league level, that matters for this team. Kyle Leahy becoming a bullpen arm that you can really trust would potentially matter for this team. So I think there are a lot more positives than negatives going on right now. And that game last night was the latest example of this, where you can look up and down the lineup and say to yourself, man, I believe in what they're trying to build here offensively, and it's really starting to come together.
Yeah, and I agree with that 100%. Like it was about finding answers on some of those young guys, and each one was a little different, right? For Mason Gwynn, was it do you avoid the sophomore slump, which has been an issue for the Cardinals when in prospects pass? And he's not done that, right? For Lars Nootbaar, it was not so much about the batter profile, though he's going through it right now. It was more of, dude, can you stay on the field, right? Like that's an important part of the best ability is availability. Like that matters. And you're getting all of these answers. Ivan Herrera, okay, like what we saw last year, he hit 300. Is that real? Yeah, it's real. That guy can hit. Like you're getting all these answers for when you get Chaim Bloom to take over next year, which is very important. Instead of going into it with a whole bunch of question marks of, okay, so like when didn't have a good year, so what does that mean for our shortstop in the long term? They're getting these answers this season, which is so important, and it is positive to see this reinforcement of, hey, they're also able to do this without the guys that were the face of this, right? This transition was supposed to be about Walker and Gorman, and it turns out maybe those guys aren't going to be the ones that end up. Gorman's playing well. Walker was starting to figure it out. But look, even if those guys don't contribute to the team, look at all these other pieces that you've got, right? You still have a core that you can build around moving forward.
Everybody knows RISP is the most important stat in the world to me. You're 5th right now in OPS in that category right now. Go through the players that are top 10 on the Cardinals. Herrera, Sajaci, we can talk about that another day. Victor Scott, Wilson Contreras, Jordan Walker, Brendan Donovan, Alec Burleson, Mason Wynn. I just listed 8 guys that are all a part of this team's future. And they're in a category that they were dog poo in the last couple of years in. That's the important thing for me this season. Not, look, it sucks to lose a game like that, but you were in it. And Ken Hitchcock used to always say, there are times that you lose games that you should have won, and there are times that you won games that you should have lost. And both are different outcomes for you.
Yeah, on Monday, you lost a game you should have won. Game 1 of this series, you should have won that game.
Right.
Last night, you had no business winning. Last night, you had no business even being in the game, and they found a way to get into the game. And part of that is it has a trickle-down effect to today. The Blue Jays will be without some of their top relievers today because of the way that the Cardinals chased some of their lower leverage guys out of the game yesterday. That is the effect of it. Like the Cardinals are a really tough out for some of these teams because they continue to push, and they require you to keep your best dudes in. And that makes it difficult over the course of a 3-game series. It makes it tougher if you get into the playoffs and you can continue to do that. They just put pressure on the opposition. We'll see what they're able to do later on this afternoon. 1:15 first pitch, Libby on the mound. A lot of pressure on him to get things back on track. Coming up in 15 minutes, we'll get into questions and answers. 314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line. If you guys have any questions, we'll get to those here in just a little bit. We've got some questions for Jeremy Rutherford, our Blues insider for The Athletic, when he joins us next here on BK and Ferrario.
Hey, Cardinals fans, make DraftKings at Casino Queen your game day headquarters. For 2 hours before the game, DraftKings at Casino Queen features $2 hot dogs and $2 beer options, property-wide drink specials, $5 cocktails and appetizers at Bridgeway Social Hour, and free game day parking with a shuttle straight to Busch Stadium. Stay at DraftKings at Casino Queen after the game and save 10% on your hotel stay when you show your tickets. Must be 21. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. Restrictions apply. Social Hour offer Tuesday through Saturday, 4 p.m. to 6 p.m.
You ever notice how some dealers brag about huge selections, but it's scattered across 5 locations, 2 counties, maybe even a sketchy storage? Come on. You got to go down to Auto Centers Nissan Herculaneum. They've got over 1,000 new and used vehicles all in one location, right off I-55 in Herculaneum. No scavenger hunt required, no headaches. And right now, during the Nissan Summer Sales Event, you can score 0% APR for 60 months on both the 2025 Nissan Rogue and the 2025.
Tanner Henderson here with a Sports Center update driven by Johnny Londoff Chevrolet and Johnny Londoff Autoplex. Cardinals fell to the Toronto Blue Jays last night 10-9 as they've dropped the first 2 games of the series and look to avoid being swept this afternoon. 1:15 will be first pitch. Eric Lauer will get the start for Toronto. Matthew Liberatore will be on the mound for St. Louis. The Sports Center update is driven by Johnny Londoff Chevrolet and Johnny Londoff Autoplex. CMOLondoff.com. Chevy, together we drive. Are you kidding me?
It's survey season here in St. Louis alongside Alex and T-Bone on BK. Happy to go out to the Callier and Thompson hotline for Jeremy Rutherford. He's the Blues insider for The Athletic, and he wrote a piece earlier today. Blues fan survey results, high confidence in Doug Armstrong heading into his final year as the Blues GM. Alex, there were a lot of questions on here, many responses that I found to be interesting, and we go out to talk to JR about that right now. JR, appreciate the time as always, man. What was the thing that stood out to you about the fan survey results that you were able to get over on The Athletic?
Yeah, I think a number of them, but I think the one that stuck out to me the most after the seasons that Dylan Holloway and Philip Broberg had, I heard a lot of people saying 8 years, give them 8 years, and regardless of what it costs, $64 million. And in the survey, you saw that a majority of the people for both Holloway and Broberg said 4 years, and I can understand that to a certain degree because the Blues have been bitten by some of these long-term contracts. But I think that when you look at Holloway, in my opinion, and Broberg, you're talking about two guys that are 23 years old. They're not 27, 28 who you're giving 8-year deals to. I think that we saw a lot from those guys last year and know that they're hard workers and know that they're going to be good players in this league. And I was of the mindset that you give them 8, but the majority of the fans in the survey said 4.
I think the part that both BK, Tanner, and I, JR, kind of all saw was the fact that at the bottom of that list was the priority rankings of trading Jordan Kyrou. How did you read that?
Yeah, and Jordan Kyrou, that question was one of the options in a question that asked about the priorities this season, and could that be trading a Justin Falk and Nick Leddy? Could that be re-signing Dylan Holloway and Philip Broberg? Should it be exploring a trade involving Jordan Kyrou? And the fans went with Holloway and Broberg as the number one priority, even ahead of signing a top 6 forward, preferably a center. And then down at the bottom, you had exploring the trade for Jordan Kyrou. So I think fans, what I read into it, Alex, is that they feel like he has made some considerable strides defensively. We all saw that last year. And then I think with the goal scoring that he's provided leading the team the last 3 years, that's a player that you can't give up on. So I think that Jordan Kyrou has really earned that last year with his play, and I think that it was reflected in the survey.
JR, fans love themselves some Radek Faksa here in St. Louis. 93% of the 1,600 responses said they would like to see Faksa back here in St. Louis. JR, you can't get 93% of St. Louisans to agree that it's a beautiful day outside today. So what did you make of that? That is a very high response for a fourth liner that, is going to play on average 10 to 12 minutes a night.
Yeah, first of all, I thought it was funny when I texted you and I said, what was your reaction to the survey? And one of your bullet points is about the love for Radek Faksa, and I chuckled
at
that.
He hates him, JR.
And I don't view it as you're anti-Radek Faksa. I view it as, I think a lot of people outside of St. Louis, they look at the fascination Blues fans have with the hard workers, the fourth liners, and don't get it. And I'm sure it's like that in a number of other cities. You could find some love for those fourth liners, but it's really a thing here in St. Louis, and we've seen it all the way from the enforcers to those fourth line grit guys. And Radek Faksa was one of those guys last year. So sure, could you change out Radek Faksa for player X in free agency and probably not see some drop off? You could, but I think he endeared himself to fans, and I think that fourth line did the same as a group. So I think that's why 93%, a little bit bigger of a number than I thought, but I figured that he'd get some love there.
I assumed there would be a lot of people that wanted him back. I just making it work roster-wise. Forget the cap for a second, because I don't think that's necessarily an issue here. They can make it work money-wise, but just the number of forwards that they're going to have on the roster in 2025, eventually you can only have so many slots, and if Joseph is still on this team and if Texier is still on this team and you want them to go out of center, you run out of spots pretty quickly, JR. How would they make this work from a roster perspective if they bring back Faksa and still want to add a middle six center?
Yeah, I just think it's, we're several months away, and we all know Doug Armstrong, and he's obviously got his game plan, and he's going to try to execute it. And I think there's a chance that you could see some guys who are under contract for next year not here, whether it be a Texier or whether it be a Matthew Joseph. I know Matthew Joseph has popped up on some buyout lists around the league. So I think that you look at what the Blues have coming back, and sure, the numbers don't work, but it's typically the case in June that you wonder what that's going to come down to, especially do you see a Dvorsky here in St. Louis to start the year? That's another roster spot that potentially gets taken up. So, if they like something, I think they stick with it. If they like the fourth line and don't want to mess with it, Radek Faksa comes back, and he comes back at the expense of whomever, one of the two guys I mentioned, or is it a Sundqvist who moves over to the wing, or he's not in the lineup. There's a number of different ways to make that work.
All right, Jerry, let's get into the nitty-gritty of this, because we've seen all of these potential free agents start to re-sign with their teams, or at least rumored to. Brock Nelson, John Tavares, Sam Bennett. So the center market is not pretty right now. You mentioned the trade board. There are a lot of names that BK Tanner and I are starting to get really excited about, whether it's the rumors of Jason Robertson coming out, or Alex Tuck, or William Karlsson. When you see these names that are starting to come out in the rumor mill, are you starting to lean more towards the Blues are going to be able to pull off a trade this offseason, or should pull off a trade this offseason?
Tuck. He
wants wingers. He's complaining about roster spots, and he wants wingers, JR.
I don't know about a winger. I think if I'm doing something, I'm doing it at center, whether it's the free agency route or the trade route. I know we talked about this last week about the potential of a trade, and you guys bring up some interesting names there. And what would it cost to get Karlsson? What would it cost to get? I was asked a question yesterday. Barbashev, if Vegas wants to move from him, is he a guy that the Blues be interested in? So there's going to be a number of options, and you can't sit here today and say, okay, I think the Blues are going to target this guy and they have a really good chance of getting them because this team really wants to move them. Like, that's hard to do in June. We'll find out here in the coming weeks, especially as you kind of get to that free agency window and a lot of trades are made at the draft. We can figure out what happens there. But to me, I look at it like this. The Blues have the assets. They have good young players that teams are interested in. They have prospects that are within the system. First-round draft picks. We're not talking about second, third, fourth-round guys. We're talking about first-round draft picks that teams that are trying to build, would covet. So I think that's what we can probably focus on is, okay, hey, let's talk about the names that are out there, and we don't know which guys are specifically going to be available. But if one or two of those guys become available, Doug Armstrong is going to be engaged, and that the Blues have what it would take to pull it off. So I think that's what it boils down to.
Follow-up question on that to Jeremy Rutherford, who's joining us here on BK and Ferrario. I'm going to give you 4 names real quick, JR. All of them have a previous history with Blues head coach Jim Montgomery, and all of them, to some degree, are either expected to be available this offseason or have been rumored to be available this offseason via trade or free agency. Charlie Coyle, Pavel Zacha, Morgan Geekie, Trent Frederick. Out of those 4, all either currently or formerly on the Bruins with Jim Montgomery, do you think any of them specifically make sense for what the Blues are trying to do down the middle?
Well, I know the name that everybody's going to talk about is Frederick. That's the hometown kid who's playing in the Stanley Cup final right now with Edmonton. And, is he a fit? He had some good offensive success earlier in his tenure with Montgomery, not so much towards the end, but can they get him back on track, or does he provide an element that the Blues feel like they're missing? But, I mean, if you're going to, I know he plays some center, he's played some wing, Fredrickson, but I think that you look at Trent Frederick, but if you look at the center position, where is the biggest need for the Blues, you look at a Coyle who played a good center for Boston a couple years ago under Jim Montgomery. You look at a Zacha, I think I would probably lean towards a person who has a track record of playing the position where the Blues need the most help. And, to me, that's where it's at. And you look at that survey that we did, and it was interesting, as you touched on, BK, that, fans take a center like a John Tavares or a Granlund or a Pius Suter over a Bennett. I think in part that was done because, Bennett's going to be super expensive, but I think the people are voicing their opinion that the Blues are going to need that help with that center depth, and I think one of those couple other guys could probably answer that bell, maybe more so than Trent Frederick.
Talk to me about Pius Suter. It's a statement nobody's ever made before, but I'll go ahead and make it right here on BK and Ferrario.
These guys are just obsessed with this guy.
I'm very much not, to be clear. I think that the center market is drying up before it ever really had an opportunity to begin. It sure sounds like Sam Bennett is likely to stick with the Florida Panthers based on all the reports that are out there. It sounds like Tavares is likely to stick with the Toronto Maple Leafs, again, according to reports that are out there. and that leaves you pretty high and dry when it comes to free agent options at the center position. So Pius Suter is among the top options. He is not a big guy, but he does play a good defensive game. What do you make of him and the kind of contract that he's likely to command this offseason, JR?
Yeah, not a big guy, but he can play both ways. And I think maybe the most attractive part is that he can be a middle six guy, and you can move him around. And he's been doing this for a while, and he's in a situation in Vancouver, BK, where that team was in turmoil last year, and they're going to be looking to mix things up. They're changing the coach with Rick Tocchet leaving, and the new coach is going to come in. They're going to have different evaluations of guys, and I think that they're going to have to change up kind of that makeup there. And they did that, obviously, with the big trade last year. The two guys bickering, can't figure it out, so let's move one of them. But I think with the rest of the roster, they're going to have to consider making moves more so than another team would that didn't go through what they went through last year. So I think with Suter, if the opportunity is there, he's the type of player who has a track record. You know what he can do. He can come in. He can play that middle six center, and he can be reliable. So I think that's how the Blues would view him.
Do you think he could basically be for them what Tyler Bozak was expected to be when he signed that contract?
Yeah, exactly. And, I'm not saying similar players. All I'm saying is a guy who, look, when Bozak was signed, he was signed to be the number 2 center. And then guess what? They make the trade for Ryan O'Reilly later that day, and now Bozak's your third-line center, and it worked out well. So I think what the Blues have to be looking for this offseason is center depth. And it's not necessarily a number 2 center. If Shen comes back and has the same chemistry with Holloway and Kyrou, maybe you like that. But, okay, so now the guy that you bring can come in and be that third-line center. Maybe you move Sundqvist over, whatever you do with him. I think all you can do is be focused on acquiring some depth at the position and then see where that player lands once the season gets going.
Hey, JR, appreciate the time as always, man. People can check out the fan survey over at The Athletic. It's a really good read. I love seeing this stuff because it gives you insight into where fans are at with some of the current situations with the Blues. Almost 1,800 responses from JR's fan survey. So check that out today over at The Athletic. We appreciate the time as always. JR, we'll talk with you again next week.
Sounds good. Thanks a lot, guys.
Absolutely. That's Jeremy Rutherford joining us as he does each Tuesday here on BK and Ferrario. We pushed it this week to Wednesday because we knew the fan survey was coming out today. Wanted to be able to discuss that with him here on the show. Alex, we did get a question from Thanks Dad about Alex Tuch, right? The guy that I'm now fascinated by. I think he would be such a good fit here in St. Louis. It is tough to find the exact spot in your lineup, but you probably have to trade a winger for him. So you can make it work that way. Said, when did Tuch join the conversation? Why wasn't he considered before? Tuch has been a late add to many of these trade boards. I know Jamie Rivers mentioned him on the fast lane as well, so that was one of the first things that tipped me off to it, but he was just mentioned today, I believe it was, over on the trade board for the Daily Faceoff.
Yeah, and it's because his agent met with Buffalo's front office at the Combine because he's got 1 year left on his contract, and so they're talking possible extension. And the reports are, and I think I've seen this from Friedman and a couple of others, that if he's not willing to sign an extension, then Buffalo's probably going to look at trying to move him and capitalize on it now.
Yeah, he is a player that I would be very interested in.
I would be too if your need was a wing.
By the way, the evolving hockey projection for his contract is 8 years, $9 million per year.
I'm not paying that. Not for a 30-year-old who can't play center.
So do you want to trade Bolduc to sign him to an 8-year deal worth $9 million per year?
No. But can I interest you in another winger that is potentially getting
Let's
8 or 9
talk about
years?
that on the other side. I also want to ask you about Charlie Coyle, who we have not had many conversations about, but I do find to be really interesting. He's on the trade board as well. We'll get into that in questions and answers here from you as well next here on 101 ESPN. With Alex and T-Bone on BK, 314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line for questions and answers. If you guys have any questions, get them in right now. We'll get to Chris Kerber here in about 10 minutes or so. Alex, you mentioned there's somebody else that you wanted to talk about as a potential option for the Blues this offseason. Who was that player?
Yeah, so we can get into this a little bit later, but I'm starting to really kind of tinfoil about Jason Robertson. And it's just because of the reports that are coming out. Jeff Merrick was talking about it yesterday on the Daily Sheet, and he said, look, if Dallas decides to trade him, which Jim Mill is very hesitant about, they're going to want a young, cost-controlled player who can play into the top six, because the whole point of this is to be able to re-sign Jamie Benn and Mikael Granlund and a lot of the guys that they have in place. And if that's the case, I know we talked about, would you trade Kyrie for him? That doesn't match what they're looking for. You'd probably be talking about, do you trade a Bolduc for him? I don't even know if that's enough for Dallas, but
probably
Dallas
Bolduc in a first.
Probably Dallas would be thinking, okay, well, he's $750,000. He's already played in the top six. You can build with that. And then if you do that under the precedent of Jason Robertson signs a contract with you, and then do you trade Kyrie to go get the centerman? It's a lot of wheeling and dealing, and as Doug Armstrong likes to say, you're robbing Peter to pay Paul. But as they point out in Jeff Merrick's piece, this guy has scored 40 goals. Those don't happen very often in the NHL. And he scored it twice. So it was just something that I tinfoiled if Jason Robertson is actually available.
And we'll get into that more coming up at the 12 o'clock hour. 314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line from the 314. Guys, for Father's Day, would you like to go out to eat, go to a winery / a brewery, or just grill at home?
Option C.
Grill at home?
Yeah. I already told Katie's like, what do you want to do for Father's Day? I said, I don't want to go to 4 places. I said, can we just be at home? All I want to do.
That's what my dad liked to do.
People want to see us come over. It's like I want to cut the grass. I want to do yard work, and I just want to sit.
Oh, he did not want to do that part.
I'm weird, though. I like doing that stuff.
Grill at home or brewery would be my top two options out of those. You guys know how much I love going to breweries, though.
Yes, we do.
Yeah.
With your son.
314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line for questions and answers from Marcus. I know this is out of left field, but would you call the Flames about Nazem Kadri?
No. Not for what he's making. And it has nothing to do with like the player and how people despise him in St. Louis. I think he's a good player, not for what he's getting paid.
What's he at? Is he at 8?
I think he's like a 7.5.
Is that 7?
Yeah. No. And I think he's got like a 7-year deal, 6-year deal.
Yeah. Nah. He's in year 4 of that. Yeah. So he's got 3 years.
He goes up until age 38.
Yeah. No.
Yeah, probably good. If they were more in their like all-in window, I'd consider it. But you're not there, so you don't need to trade for the very back end of a deal. He's 34 years old right now. I don't want to lock myself into that for multiple years.
Yeah.
314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line for questions and answers from the 314. Can the Cardinals be a legitimate contender in the future if Pages is their everyday catcher? Yeah. The Astros won multiple World Series with Martin Maldonado behind the plate. It just puts more pressure on the rest of your offense. If you're going to have a guy like Pages in there every day, and if Victor Scott is a well below league average hitter, which is possible, you're going to need your top 6 in your lineup to be excellent. And that probably requires them to add some kind of a legitimate force, a more legitimate force for that like 2, 3, 4 spot in your order. One of those 3 spots.
Cardinals,
but you can, yeah.
And even like to localize that, Cardinals won a World Series in 2006. You know who their catcher was?
Great
and
point.
I'm not saying this is what Paz is going to become, but it was Yadier Molina. His slash line that year, I'll just do the batting average. 216 was the batting average. He was a 53 OPS plus. You can have just a defensive catcher. You can have just a defensive center fielder. We've
Look
talked
at the
about
2011 Cardinals. Their middle infield wasn't exactly tearing it up offensively.
Yeah, because that was what? Skip, Furcal, Descalzo? Was Descalzo?
I think that was the group, yep.
Yeah, and like those were really good players, really solid defensive players. You've got, to your point, you've got to have about 5-6 dudes that can hit, and then you need 2 really good defensive studs you can have at the back part of that order.
314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line for questions and answers from the 314. Guys, has Nolan Gorman earned everyday playing time right now? Yeah, for right now.
He's earned a look. Yeah, I mean, what you've wanted from him is the bat heating up, and it's heating up. So, yeah, you get a little bit of a runway now.
I agree. I think you give him a little runway because we've seen this before with Gorman, right? He gets hot for like a 3-week stretch, looks like one of the best bats you could have in your lineup, and then you got to know when to pull the plug because he'll go back through another 3-week lull.
I think that this is his opportunity. I think it is coinciding well with Lars Nootbaar going through a slump, Donnie dealing with this toe issue that he's got going on right now. Jordan Walker still on the IL, working his way back. It sounds like he's going to start a rehab assignment later on this week. So the timing couldn't have been better, honestly, for Nolan Gorman to start going through a bit of a hot stretch. Where it gets interesting is when Donnie starts feeling better, when Nootbaar is back into the lineup on an everyday basis, which probably starts today, and Jordan Walker is back, that's when it gets tough. Because you want Burleson in there, you want Ivan Herrera in there. You're not going to take Donovan out of there. You could see somewhat of a platoon with Jordan Walker when he returns from the injured lists to kind of ease his way back into things. And that gets a little difficult to navigate if you're Ollie. So that's where things get tough. 314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service X line to get involved in the show. In 15 minutes, could the Cardinals still make the playoffs if they trade Ryan Helsley at the deadline? It's something the Fast Lane mentioned yesterday. Wanted to get your guys' thoughts on this coming up in 15 minutes. Chris Kerber, the voice of the Blues, joins us next here on 101 ESPN.
Hey, look, when it comes to getting your air conditioner fixed, or maybe in the fall and winter, getting that furnace looked at, the folks at Classic Air Care know that you have a choice. And they know that there's a lot of choices out there. But that's why they take care of the customers in a way that nobody else does. Classic Air Care prides themselves on customer service. It's not just we're going to come into the house and fix the problem. They're going to educate you on what the problem is. They're going to let you know step by step what they've done and why they've done it. They're going to show you ways to help you take care of your own unit yourself. And one of the ways you can do that is simply by changing your air filter on a regular basis. But there are ways you can help with their own maintenance as if it was your own car. That's what Classic Air Care does. They're quality. They've been making people comfortable since 1926. They're local. They've got different technicians from all different ages that can make sure that whatever unit you have is taken care of. They've got guys with over 40 years of experience in working for them. Look, the reality of it is it is a simple process. Something goes wrong, you've got to call somebody. You call the folks at Classic Air Care. They've got a 4.8 Google rating for a reason. You can check that out at classicaircare.com. They take care of my household. They can take care of yours. Log online at classicaircare.com.
Alongside Alex and T-Bone, I'm BK. It's BK and Ferrario here on 101 ESPN, and we're happy to go out to the Callier and Thompson hotline to be joined by our friend, the voice of the Blues. He's Chris Kerber joining us here on the show, normally at 1:30. Today he's going out to the Cardinals game, so he is joining us at noon. Kerbs, appreciate the time as always, man. How you doing today?
Brandon, doing well. How are you guys?
We're doing really well. We spent a decent amount of time in the last hour, Kerbs, talking about what lies ahead for the Blues this offseason. And we've been banding around, kicking around some of the names that are potentially out there. I wanted to get your thoughts. I asked this question of JR earlier today, and I want to get your thoughts on it as well, if you don't mind. There are four centers that are going to be available potentially this offseason that have some kind of a history with Jim Montgomery. They're Charlie Coyle, Pavel Zacha, Morgan Geekie, and Trent Frederick. Those four guys all potentially available either via trade or free agency this offseason. Do any of those specific names interest you for what the Blues are looking for, Kerbs?
Yeah, I think they do. Frankly, I think any one of the four probably could. The one that I've been honing in on out of all those the most is Trent Frederick. More because of the other aspect of the game that he brings. And I loved it. Look, I know they were losing. I know they were also losing their minds, right? But you got a guy that's willing to put a stick to the back of Sam Bennett, you know, and break his stick over his ribs trying to win a Stanley Cup. I'm cool with that. So, like, I think that is more of an all-around team toughness aspect that the St. Louis Blues need. If you can accomplish that with a guy that had two of his best years under Jim Montgomery, I think that's a definite way to look. A guy that I got to think would love to be playing back at home if he had the opportunity, right? And so I think that one is one I'm definitely looking into. The other three for me, BK, comes down to term. It really just comes down to term. I think that if they can strengthen that center position in that second/third spot, and it doesn't have to be a bona fide number two. It could be a guy that can play number two, move up to number three. Like a Boone Jenner, for example, in a trade with Columbus, for example, okay? A guy, he's 31 years old. You know exactly what he is. You know what he brings. A guy like him, and he and Braden Shen can move back and forth, that kind of thing. And you're really good in your second and third line. You're bridging a gap while you're developing Dvorsky, right? I don't think you need to lock somebody in for 5 years in that spot there. So, to me, I like the idea of, frankly, looking at all of those because I think all of those could probably help you in some way, shape, or form. It just depends on the term. Trent Frederick brings a little bit more to the table in terms of some of that team toughness, that blue style of hockey, though, that intrigues me a little more.
Which one do you think's more important for the Blues this offseason then, Kerbs? Because I remember Doug talking about a 200-foot offensive weapon is something that they would like to add, but you talking about that physicality and just that different elements to the game in terms of your forward group, which one do you think the Blues feel like is more desired?
Well, here's the thing. I think they desire them both, to be honest with you. I mean, when you look at building where you're going to go, and I realize that's probably, Alex, the cop-out answer. If you said you had to pick one or the other, I'm going to pick the one that actually kind of gets me to both a little bit, and that's the guy that I was just talking about. To me, and here's why. Like, look, you saw last season. You saw this team really come together through Braden Shen's leadership. And it wasn't just Braden Shen that had to pull everybody into the fight. You saw different players doing it, Nathan Walker and other guys on the team. What Tyler Tucker did in the time that he played was huge. I think he earned himself a top 6 spot with the St. Louis Blues. Jake Neighbors, they did it as well. When you go back and look, and this isn't just always about fighting, but it's about how you stand up. And there was a team toughness this past year that was clearly missing for a few years. I mean, it was missing in a big way. Somebody would bump the goaltender, nothing would happen. Well, it wasn't once or twice all last year where somebody bumped the goaltender without getting a glove in the face. So to me, look, and you're looking at what Florida is doing now. It's a critical part. Look at that's the biggest change in the Edmonton Oilers too, by the way. It's kind of that team toughness attitude, to be able to lock games down, to be able to stand up for each other. So I think that is another continued critical development angle for the St. Louis Blues as they get back to relevance.
We're talking to Chris Kerber, the voice of the Blues here on 101 ESPN. And Kerbs, I do want to talk about a team within the division. The Dallas Stars are going through what is going to be a fascinating offseason for them. They fired their coach. Now there's talk that Jason Robertson could be traded this offseason to open up some cap space. They're not sure about the AAV that they would have to give him on a long-term deal. What do you make of the position that the Stars find themselves in right now? And do you think they're going to be a better team next year than they were this past year?
Do I think they're going to be a better team? Yeah, I don't know the answer to that. I really don't know the answer to that. They've got a good goaltender, that you know. They've got good young defense, that you know. I don't see when you have a Jason Robertson, I don't know why you trade him, right? Okay, that makes no sense if you're still trying to be
re-sign
good.
Jamie Benn and Mikael Granlund. Apparently, that's the answer.
Okay, guys. All right. Well, whoever is writing that you need to trade Jason Robertson to re-sign those two guys is somebody you don't have to worry about reading when they write hockey anymore.
But they're not just saying that for no reason. Like, these are well-informed individuals that are getting that from somewhere. And that's, to me, what I find to be really fascinating about all of this.
I'm going to bet you an order of chicken wings at Obi Clark's that doesn't happen for that reason. Because here's the deal. I just, you have a player. You have a player that can get you 40 goals. You have a guy that's borderline superstar, okay? You're not going to walk from that to sign a 38-year-old forward. Now, I know they want to sign Jamie Benn. The cap is going to go up. The deal is going to be, and you can go out and you're going to find another Michael Granlund. They're going to have some things. They still have some young talent in that organization as well. Jim Nill is drafted well. To me, the Dallas Stars are an intriguing spot, right? Because they've had a window of 4 or 5 years here to win a Stanley Cup championship and hasn't done it. Now you're going to end up with some contracts expiring and you're going to have to make some hard decisions, right? The hard decision is not trading a Jason Robertson to re-sign a Jamie Benn. You know, that's an easy one, right? That's a no, we're not doing that. Okay, so there's other ways to do it, but to me, I just think that they're going to be in that challenge spot where if the one thing, and listen, Jim Nill has found a way, kind of like Detroit did for 25 years, and he was the assistant GM for a long time, to find the players to stay relevant. All right, so the one thing I wouldn't do, I wouldn't count the Dallas Stars out for nothing, because they're going to be right in the thick, and they're still going to be good.
The tough part, Curbs, is because I'm with you. They're going to be in the thick of it. This is a good team. They've got Rantanen. They've got this is a good team. I'm not pushing back on any of that whatsoever. I just on the Robertson side of things, they have 8 forwards, 6 defensemen under contract right now. You still need to add 7 more players to the roster. And even if all of those guys were at the veteran minimum, they don't currently have enough money to spend to sign all of those players. So they have to do something from their current roster just to free up some cap space. I personally would not recommend doing that with Jason Robertson. But that's where this becomes a really fascinating discussion for them is, okay, if not him, then where does that flexibility come from? And what do those middle 6 players look like for you that you're going to potentially move Robertson for? You'll get something in return. They would, I would imagine, get a really good return if they moved Robertson. And maybe that's part of this as well, right? They get, I don't know, if they were to trade him to the Blues, I would have to imagine they would be looking at Snuggerud, Bolduc, Neighbors, that type of return, plus maybe draft pick compensation, and maybe they flip that for something as well. You could get a lot for Robertson, right?
Well, you can. Well, you know what you're not going to get for Robertson? Is
40-goal score.
Okay. Now, and let me expand this for just a moment. This will maybe be we can get deeper into this part of this conversation as the offseason goes on, because I'm actually fascinated by this one here, okay? But look, you're looking at some people throwing Jordan Kyrou's name out there, right? How do you trade a 30-goal scorer, a 3-time 70-point player? I mean, some of the Blues haven't had much of in 25 years, right? Okay. Robertson's name comes up. All these different names comes up. Mitch Marner. What does Toronto do? Okay. Here's the one thing. The Florida Panthers changed the course of their franchise, and they did so by trading away a 115-point player in Huberdeau and a top 4 defenseman in Mackenzie Weegar. Now, I get it. That was because Matthew Tkachuk was available. Okay? And not every year do you go into a scenario where a Matthew Tkachuk is available. All right, so keeping that small little caveat and asterisk in mind, My point is this, is you look at some of the teams that are continuing to be in the battle, the Dallas Stars, the Toronto Maple Leafs, the Carolina Hurricanes, some of these teams that just haven't been able to get over that hump. And depending on where they are in that window, hockey trades could actually make a difference, okay? I believe that there are trades that could be made, right? Like, I mean, if you are trading and you're acquiring a Rantanen-type player, yes, maybe you do give up a Robertson, okay, for that. So there's three things I'd say over the last 10 years that start to change your philosophy or how maybe you should look at building a team if you're a general manager. One, what the Vegas Golden Knights have done. Two, just their cold-hearted killer aspect of handling the cap and contracts, right? And then the other part is what the Florida Panthers did. And actually, I'm going to throw in what Doug Armstrong did with the Broberg and Holloway contracts, okay? They're finding ways to go about this. I mean, the Blues aren't anywhere near where they were without those two deals, right? And they added two players to the team that just sped up the development of this team by at least 3 years, in my opinion. So to me, I'm not ruling out that they couldn't trade them, guys, right? Because if there is a real hockey trade to be made, maybe they look at it. But to me, he's their future. Tyler Seguin, he's their top offensive guy for the future here. And so I have a hard time seeing that one unless, hey, look, are you putting together a deal that includes a Brady Tkachuk? Are you doing something that includes a Nylander or something like that? I don't know.
The money, though, Curbs, the money is a big part of this. I think if they're making this move, Curbs, and we could spend more time on this in the offseason, I find it all to be really interesting from a team-building perspective. If they're moving Robertson, it is almost purely about the money because you have Rantanen, Seguin, Hintz, and Johnson all signed long-term at least $8.5 million. And then you go to their defensive core, and they've got a guy signed for $8.5 million there. They've got a goalie signed for $8.5 million. That Rantanen deal really limits your flexibility. And you do it because it's Mikko Rantanen. But
it feels like they're prioritizing depth of their team versus top heaviness of their team.
Well, yeah, guys, I get that. But, look, here's another thing. I think Seguin would, have 3 years left?
2, yeah.
I think.
2
this
or 3
year
years
and one
left.
more. Okay. All right. Before you are trading Robertson, you are buying out Seguin or you're trading Tyler Seguin.
He's got a no move?
Okay. Well, you're going to have to, listen, there's other ways around the no move, right? Okay, we're just not going to play you. You know, you're going to be benched for a while, whatever it is. You can do that. You can convince him of that. I mean, I've seen general managers do it. We saw Doug Armstrong, Larry Plow do it with Doug Waite, right? When Doug Waite denied the trade to Anaheim that brought Andy McDonald to St. Louis. Like, there's ways to do it. And that's another problem there with the no move. You're absolutely right there, BK. Like, it's a challenge. But somehow, I'm not getting rid of Robertson to keep Tyler Seguin or to keep one of those other guys. Tyler Seguin is not the future. Jamie Benn is not the future. You know, I mean, the real – plus, there's no guarantee that they're going to re-sign Johansson, right? No, who am I thinking
Johnson,
of?
he's under contract.
No, not Johnson. Why am I blanking here all of a sudden? The former Nashville Predator signed the 1-year deal with him. Been around.
Duchesne. Yeah.
Yes. Right. There's no guarantee that you're going to sign that guy. So there's some goals you're going to have to replace, and they're going to come from Robertson. I'm not saying nothing is possible. I'm saying that one's a hard one for me to stomach, and that just feels like people are trying to come up with scenarios. I don't believe that's a realistic one, but that's also why I'm also a broadcaster. Not sitting in the boardroom, too, maybe, right?
We got this from the 314. All of this conversation just makes me feel so much better about the contracts that the Blues were able to get for Parayko, Thomas, and Kerber. Yeah. 100%.
1,000%.
When the Blues signed those deals and you lock them in prior to this spike in the cap for the $8 million or for Parayko at $6, those deals are going to age gracefully. Stuff is going to get really expensive over the next few years.
Curbs, we finally made it. People agree that the Parayko contract is a steal. We finally made it, Curbs.
It took a little while. Listen, and I know nobody even really wanted to hear it when it came to the Kyrou and Thomas ones a couple of years ago. But we even said then, like, guys, in a couple of years, these could look like real absolute bargains, and it is going to look that way. And listen, guys, here's the other thing, real quick. You know, teams with the salary cap going up, and with for the first time with them knowing how much the cap is going to go up over a 3-year period, which was an absolutely smart move by the PA and the NHL to come to that agreement and let that out. Because now general managers can plan.
Sure.
Like it used to be, you thought where the cap might go, but you weren't sure, right? And so how do you sign a long-term contract thinking they could handcuff you, right? That uncertainty was not good for the game, not good for fans, not good for players. But having said that, you still have things where these buyouts, the way teams are using a long-term IR, and I don't see the stomach in these possible negotiations. I'm not hearing that they're changing that up much. I hope they do, but the LTIR loophole. But the reality of it is teams have to find ways to bring in more revenue, right? And they're going to have to find a way to meet that salary cap, because if you're going to compete, you still got to play in the sandbox with the big boys, right? And yes, you can win a cup by spending 15, 20. You can compete like Minnesota has by spending $15 million less than the other teams in the league, right? But you could also see the limitations in it. It's a hard thing to do. So that's another aspect as the cap is going up is, do you see as many teams get to the cap as we have in the last few years when it was flat coming out of that COVID situation? And at one point in time, you had all but like 2 teams in the league within $1 million of the cap. I wonder if that's going to continue.
Curbs, appreciate the time as always, man. Enjoy yourself out of the game tonight for the St. Louis Cardinals. Talk with you again next week.
All right, guys. Have an awesome day.
See you, Curbs. That's Chris Kerber, voice of the Blues, joining us as he does each Wednesday here on BK and Ferrario. The Robertson situation is really interesting, man. We're seeing this with Vegas. They are cap-strapped right now, and they'd like to go make some moves. We're seeing this with Colorado. They're cap-strapped right now. They'd like to make some moves, and now you're seeing it with Dallas as well. A bunch of teams in the Western Conference that have been pushing for years that continue to try to push to get over the top, get over the hump. It's hard to stay at that level and to pay your guys that you want to pay and make a move like adding Mikko Rantanen. I hear what Curbs is saying. I wouldn't want to trade Jason Robertson either. But when you look at the way that they can maneuver, there is almost no other move that exists for them. Mm-hmm. Maybe they could move Mason Marchment. That is another one that is on the table.
And that's what the report is that they're trying to do.
It makes all the sense in the world to do that prior to moving Jason Robertson and to prioritize making that move. If they can't, if there's not a taker, if he decides to block all of the deals that are potentially there because he's got a modified no-trade clause, dude, you eventually get yourself to the place where we have to move somebody. And the guy that we're probably going to have to move is Jason Robertson, because he could also bring us back those middle 6 forwards that could allow us to fill out the roster. Because our top is good with Rantanen and Hintz and Wyatt Johnson. Like, that's the top of the roster. Robertson is hopefully going to be a part of that for them, but there's no guarantee they can make it work.
Well, and I think the reason that they're having this conversation is because they acquired Mikko Rantanen. They got Rantanen because they're
Absolutely.
like, look, we get Rantanen now, who is not just a 40-goal scorer, a 50-goal scorer who's 28 years old.
He's a superstar.
Jason Robertson is 3 years younger, yes, but by the time he gets to 27, he could be talking about $10 million. Would you rather...
More.
Yeah, would you rather have the guy who is doing this consistently or the guy that has done it twice and we don't know what it's going to look like? And then you really have to ask yourself the question, do top-heavy teams win in the NHL anymore? Like, you can point to Edmonton and say they're top-heavy. I could argue that because, well, now they've added more depth to their team and more physicality to their team. Florida may look top-heavy on paper. I mean, they got Brad Marchand on the third line. They've got depth to their team. The top-heavy teams, the Toronto Maple Leafs, are typically the ones that are selling off assets because their best guys can't get the job done.
Let's put a bow on this on the other side. Is this the player that you potentially break the bank for if you're the Blues? We'll talk about it next year on 101 ESPN. stories in the NHL right now is what's going to happen with the Dallas Stars. We just spent, almost 20 minutes talking about that with Chris Kerber, the voice of the Blues. So if you missed any of our conversation with him, check it out on the podcast
I'm looking at the clock on how are we making this one.
101ESPN.com, the free 101 ESPN app is where you go to find it. We're going to have a TMA segment right here. It's going to be like less than 5 minutes.
All right, coming up
next. We're going to talk about the Cardinals coming up here in just a little bit. But Jason Robertson's the talk of the town, Alex. 1 year, $7.5 million where he's at. He's an RFA after this season. It's very possible he gets traded. I don't know for sure that he will, but it's something that the Stars, at least according to reports, are considering this offseason. If you're in Doug Armstrong's shoes and you're looking at, okay, how do we improve this team? You don't love the free agent market. You need to acquire a center. So that's one thing that is on your list. But this opportunity is available, and you can't just immediately dismiss it. Like, you got to at least talk about it with your group, right? If the Stars called and said, hey, Army, we're looking at this. What's your best offer? We're trying to put all the best offers on the board, and then we're going to consider what we think is the best one. What do you think that looks like for the Blues? And do you think it's even something they should consider?
I think what it looks like for the Blues is you're asking for one of Snuggerud, Bolduc, Neighbors. Part of me feels like they would lean more towards the Snuggerud or the Bolduc because they want goal-scoring wingers if you're getting
I think the first ask from them is Snuggerud.
Probably.
That's the starting point.
I actually think the first ask is probably a Dylan Holloway. And,
sure.
And they're hanging up the phone.
Go bleep yourself. That's not
But
happening.
it's probably going to be Bolduc or Snuggerud. And I actually would lean more Bolduc because he's more NHL proven than Snuggerud. There's more hype, but if you're Dallas, we need a guy who steps right into the top six and can score us 25 goals. And that's Bolduc, at least if you're the general manager. But I don't think that's all. I think you're talking about this year's first-round pick, probably another early round pick in the coming years, and then one of your top prospects. Like, you're putting together a package to get Jason Robertson. Does it make sense for the Blues? Man, if we're only talking about one guy off of your NHL roster, yeah.
Like, if they said, we want Neighbors, we want one of your top four prospects, one of the guys that's in the system right now, like Lindstein,
Stenberg,
Stenberg, one of those guys, and a first-round pick. That is what we would take for Robertson. I'm not sure that gets it done.
Yeah.
It might be more than that, but if that's the way that they look at it, would you be willing to do it?
I'd have to try and negotiate off of Neighbors and get Bolduc on that one.
I don't probably hold firm and say no.
And I don't think I could do it. I know that sounds crazy, but I don't think you could trade Jake Neighbors. Jake Neighbors feels kind of like a heartbeat type of player of the team that I don't know if you can afford to lose. If we can talk about getting rid of like a Bolduc, then that would make sense. But there's more to that puzzle. It's not just acquiring him. It's once you have them, now what are you doing elsewhere? Because you still have to move off of another one of your wingers to go get the centerman position. Because now you've taken Bolduc off and you've brought in Robertson, and that's a big ask for you, but you still have the centerman problem, and you've got a lot of wingers.
I don't think I do this. I don't think Robertson's the guy that I'm breaking the bank for. I'm willing to go and, like, if you want to go big game hunting, we can talk about that. Now, Robertson's just the guy that's available, and so that's why we're making him the point of discussion. Like, I would rather have Alex Tuch than Jason Robertson. I would. He's 29 years old. He's going to get a lot of money. If it's going to be $9 million on an 8-year deal, like, that really worries me given his age. And that's part of this with Robertson. He's 25, 26 years old. So you could get him on a long-term deal before he gets to that, late 30s range. But, like, I think Alex Tuch is a better fit with the St. Louis Blues than Jason Robertson is. And if you go out and acquire Robertson, I think you have to trade Kyrou. I don't think you can have both of them in your top six and feel great about it. I don't know that. I think they're too similar in terms of their playing styles. Both of them kind of float in and out of the game defensively. Both can be a bit of a liability.
I think if you acquire a top six winger, you really have to have the discussions of trading away Jordan Kyrou.
That's what I just said.
Well, I thought you just meant in Tuch. Like, no matter what.
Oh, no, I'm talking about with Robertson. With Robertson, I'm trading Kyrou.
I think with Tuch you have to as well.
I don't feel that way with Tuch. Tuch's a totally different player.
Getting pushed to your third line then?
What do you mean?
Like, if you get Tuch and keep Kyrou, who's getting pushed to your third line?
In that scenario, I think you're probably trading one of Neighbors or Bolduc. So just that guy is gone now. So I would go like Booch, Thomas, Tuch. Holloway, Shin, Kyrou, Snuggie, whoever your third line center is, and Neighbors.
So you're pushing Snuggerud down to the third line. And I mean, I think they're saying Snuggerud's a top 6 winger for us.
Sure. I could also, if you want to, just put Booch down to the third line. Like, that's not something for me. That would be, because I like having extra depth. If they think that they need Snuggie into the top 6, well, then just play him as a top 6 player.
I do too, but the only reason I'm asking is I think if you would go acquire a winger that plays into your top 6, you're pushing somebody to the third line that you don't like. Neighbors is a perfect example. They didn't want Neighbors on the third line last year. Jim Montgomery was like, he plays in our top 6. We just don't know how to make this work.
I think on a contender, Neighbors is a third line winger. And if I'm being honest, I think on a legitimate contender right now, this year, Snuggerud is a third line winger.
Yeah. If you acquire a top 6 winger, I think you have to have serious discussions of trading Kyrou to go make a hockey trade to go get that centerman for him if you acquire a winger.
He's Alex Ferrario. That's Tanner Hendrickson. I'm Brandon Kiley. If you've missed any of our Blues conversations today, check him out on the podcast page, 101ESPN.com, and the free 101 ESPN app is where you can go to find it. That is all sponsored by
Schaefer Door Company.
Coming up next, we got to get back to the Cardinals. Can this team still make the playoffs if they traded Ryan Helsley at the deadline? It's something the Fast Lane brought up yesterday. I want to get into that next year on 101 ESPN.
Bet like the pros with the world's largest sports book right at your fingertips. Circus Sports is now available in Illinois. Hi, I'm Derek Stevens. I've been a lifelong sports bettor, and I'm the owner of Circus Sports. We're excited that the Circus Sports app is now ready for action. Experience big app bets with high betting limits, tight money line splits, and more. Now you can download, fund, and bet like a pro from anywhere in Illinois. Download your new bookie today at circusports.com. If you or someone you know may have a problem with gambling, call 1-800-GAMBLER or text ILGAMB to 833-234.
Tanner Hendrickson here with a Sports Center update driven by Johnny Londoff Chevrolet and Johnny Londoff Autoplex. Cardinals back in action coming up at 1:15 today as they look to avoid the sweep against the Toronto Blue Jays. Eric Lauer will be on the mound for Toronto this afternoon. Matthew Liberatore will be getting the start for St. Louis. 1:15 will be first pitch. This Sports Center update is driven by Johnny Londoff Chevrolet and Johnny Londoff Autoplex. CMondoff.com. Chevy, together we drive. Are you kidding me?
We've been talking about Ryan Helsley a lot the last few days. Part of that is, the blow-ups, 3 straight blown saves. It hasn't been great for him. A lot of it, though, is, man, what does this team do at the deadline? He feels like he's the key to everything. If you trade Ryan Helsley, you could get a significant return for him. I mean, you're talking about, the deal that the Cardinals got in return for Jordan Montgomery, you probably get something similar to that. And they got TK Roby and Thomas Ajayci, both of whom they hope play into their future. A lot of the other assets that they have would be more in the Jack Flaherty, the Genesis Cabrera, those kinds of returns, which, let's be honest, haven't really netted you a whole lot at the major league level since they made those moves.
Who was the Genesis Cabrera trade return?
Swanson, yeah.
I think. It was either him or DeYoung.
Yeah, one of those two, they got Swanson.
All of those trades, man, are a blur other than JC and Roby.
Yeah, all of the other ones. There's
Flaherty they got.
Flaherty they got Rom.
The guy from
Prito.
Yeah,
Prito.
And they got some low Showalter, I think. He was like a low A pitcher at the time. And I think he does have a future with them. So we'll see there. But the moral of the story here is Helsley's your chip. That's the one that could really get you something of significance. So he's the one that we're going to talk about as we get, we're 6 weeks away now from the trade deadline. The Fast Lane had an interesting conversation yesterday, Alex, and it was in regards to my rant on our show. And then they took it a step further and talked about, can this team still make the playoffs if they traded Ryan Helsley at the deadline? Take a listen.
The Cardinals could still make the playoffs without Ryan Helsley and set themselves up for the future. And you're talking about baseball, where if you do get a couple of prospects, you're talking about acquiring players that are cost controlled that could be in your system for 6, 7, 8 years. The most sought after commodity at the MLB trade deadline are relievers. And I think Ryan Helsley, unless he continues to trend in the wrong direction, will be a highly sought-after commodity.
I don't think, at the same time, I don't think hanging on to Ryan Helsley is the main thing that's going to get them over the hump to make the playoffs. Mm-hmm. I think you can find another guy to close out games and still, at the same time, continue to, not rebuild, continue to build this team for the future by doing so.
I don't think you can. I don't think this team can make it to the margin for error with this team is so narrow, dude. It is so thin. I think we're already seeing that. They have got to have all of this and then some if they're going to make the playoffs. Once you pull one piece out of this Jenga board, things get dicey. And that is a concern for me. Trying to buy into a team that feels this fragile, or it feels like if you have any injuries, it could all topple over. That is a dicey proposition, and it is something that if you're in John Mozeliak's shoes, I think you have to at least consider. I think it's one pitcher on the IL. And it's Zach Thompson, who wasn't really in their plans for this season anyways. So you look at this, if somebody went down, oh boy, you could be in a really tough spot. And I feel the same way about trading Helsley. If you traded Helsley, that clubhouse, I think, would be in a pretty bad spot mentally. I don't think that's a great thing to just throw into there, especially if they're still in it. And B, I think it means that your bullpen, it's not just who replaces Helsley. You could put Mates on in that role. I think he'd be fine. I don't know if it's great, but he's fine. Eighth inning, maybe you feel okay about it with Leahy, Matz, whoever it is that you go ahead and throw into that. It's the 7th and the 6th inning that you really start to get light. We're talking about the chase relievers. Those guys are now going into the 6th or 7th inning as leverage guys. I don't think this team makes the playoffs if they trade Ryan Helsley.
Yeah, well, and the problem is, like you just mentioned, the 6th and 7th is your problem. Well, now you're adding on to what's already kind of a problem. You don't have a stopper now, and now you're going into it adding another issue. Could they make the playoffs? Probably. But I think you're taking a massive hit to the chemistry that this team has built, the DNA that they've built up. Because when you pluck an impactful player out of a locker room, the whole team looks at this like, what are you doing? This is the guy that's supposed to get us to the playoffs. I think you could fill that void. you're still going to be asking for other areas to take steps forward, doing more than what they're supposed to be doing, which exhaustion sets in. And I think down the stretch, it hurts you more than it helps you. But when you lose a DNA, when you lose that feeling of we're invincible because everything is dominant for us right now, well, now is when you start to get those guys like, man, what just happened? The team doesn't believe in us. They're not bringing in reinforcements. They're selling. Why should we continue to put that same effort out there? I do agree with Stoltz. Like, Helsley is a massive chip
totally
that could set you up for they've got pitching depth problems. You could get 2 or 3 guys in your system that could help that depth. But the problem is, at what risk do you take that trade versus what you're trying to build with this young group of players and tell them, hey, if you play well, we will invest in you.
And I think, too, most importantly, especially when you're in it, it's a totally different conversation. If you're out of it, you have to take the shots in the dark like they did in the 23 deadline. But that's what the 23 deadline was, right? Was just kind of throwing darts in the dark and see if you land on the dartboard or not. And right now the answer is maybe you've landed on a couple of pieces that are nice, but there's also a couple pieces that you missed. I would rather just wait till the offseason and attach the comp pick to him. And then if he leaves, you know what? I'll take my shot in the dark at the draft. I saw this happen in the division. I think sometimes the locker room stuff gets overstated, but I did see what happened when a team in the division traded their closer, an elite-level closer, and Josh Hader, the 2022 trade deadline. That was the Milwaukee Brewers, and they fell out of it, right? Because to your point on, the team looks at it and goes, well, wait a minute, where are our reinforcements? We've just battled for 3-4 months now to put ourselves in a position that nobody believes in us getting here, and now you're just going to sell off this piece because he's a big asset for us. I think it'd be a huge mistake to trade Ryan Helsley at this year's trade. I don't think they would make the playoffs. They make that move, I would write them off.
It is. I mean, Alex mentioned it. You could get some serious pitching in return. Like if you traded Ryan Helsley, I'm about to mention Tanner Scott, you could get the Tanner Scott return. What Tanner Scott netted for the Marlins last year when they traded him to the Padres was something of significance. I mean, Robbie Snelling was the top prospect that they got in return. He is in Double-A. He is 21 years old. He has a 4.1 ERA this year in Double-A as a starting pitcher in the Marlins system, and he's striking out 11 batters per 9 innings. That's a real arm.
And that's cost controlled for 7+ years.
Exactly. That's like TK Roby. That's essentially what you're talking about there. They also got a 24-year-old starter in that deal as well, who last season with San Diego was not having a great year, but this year down in AAA is having a very good season. And he was like a top 5 prospect in the Padres system, starting pitcher, right-handed guy. And this year he has in the minor leagues for the Marlins a 3.4 ERA. Not a ton of strikeout stuff, but a good pitcher that could impact their rotation probably this time next year. That's the kind of thing that you could get in return for Ryan Helsley. So I'm not trying to diminish the type of package that you could get. It's real. It's significant. But like, is Robbie Snelling a significantly better prospect than you would get with a 75th overall pick? I don't know. And that's the kind of pick that you would get potentially in a comp pick. Somebody asked me the other day, BK, what if Ryan Helsley just accepts the qualifying offer? If he doesn't end up having the season that he thought, what if he just accepts the $22 million deal? Then what? Well, then you have a $22 million reliever either on your roster next year or that you can trade. It's like this is not the only opportunity that you have to cash in on Ryan Helsley. There is still potentially an offseason discussion to be had here, and I think that sometimes gets left out of the discussion. It's like an all-or-nothing approach where you either get all of these prospects for Helsley or you get nothing for Ryan Helsley, and that's just not the case. You get all these prospects or get the comp pick potentially, you get a trade opportunity in the offseason, and on top of that, you get the right to try to make the playoffs with Helsley. It's not an either-or situation.
I do feel like another question that needs to be asked is, do you believe that the Cardinals front office is going to be willing to spend money to fill the voids that you could fill with Ryan Helsley? Because that's really, like, if they're not going to trade Ryan Helsley and pitching depth is a problem, well, at some point you're going to have to start bringing more depth in. I know you're drafting and developing, but if you're making the playoffs, you're not drafting in the ideal spot. Those take a little bit more time. Can you fill that void faster by trading Helsley to make you more competitive in the future?
Probably.
That's because the front office that may not be willing to spend money in free agency when they reset the books, this is your opportunity to give yourself 7 or 8, 9 depth pitchers rather than having 6 of them.
That's a big part of this. I have to concede this argument. You're better in 2026 most likely if you trade Ryan Helsley at this year's deadline. Because whoever you get with the 75th overall pick will be further away than the prospects that you're able to get for Ryan Helsley at this year's deadline. I can't argue that. There is no argument for that. The very strong likelihood is those guys will be closer to the big leagues than whoever you get in next year's draft. And you have to wait until July to get that pick anyways. So that's part of this. And then it just comes down to what is the value of having Ryan Helsley the rest of this year? How do you value that? Do you think that that is more valuable? And if the fast lane thinks that you can make the playoffs without Ryan Helsley, then there's no value of having Ryan Helsley because I don't agree with that. My starting point is I think if you trade Helsley, you're conceding the playoffs this year. I truly believe that. And so I'm not willing to do that just yet. If they're 10 games out by the time we get to July 31st, yeah, you got to trade Helsley. That's the smart move. You've got to do it. If you're where you are today, which is a game, 2 games back, that's where I think it gets really, really tough.
Yeah, and I would push back too on if you trade Helsley, you are better in 26. I'm not denying the. Well,
what do you mean?
So you said, trading Helsley probably helps you and you are better potentially in 2026.
What's the counterpoint to that?
My counterpoint would be that doesn't. You may get these great arms that we're talking about. We haven't seen those Marlins guys, if that's the return, right? All you get is just a prospect.
But you're better set up in 26.
Maybe.
The Marlins could be slow playing this too.
It's definitely maybe. It's definitely maybe. Those arms may not ever make it to the big leagues,
sure,
right?
But you're better set up.
So I just heard ourselves in 25 while believing this ideology that we are better set up in 26.
No, those
guys may never get to the level you need to.
You also have to be open to the possibility that they will, though.
But doesn't depth help?
See, and I think that you always are upset about viewing all these. To me, that's bad process.
What do you mean?
I think that's terrible process of we're trading away this guy now because even though we could be in the playoffs, which we've talked about on the show, are valuable for true shots in the dark, right? Acquiring prospects means nothing, right? Prospects are prospects. You may acquire them, and I truly believe you get to the playoffs, this team, they're probably not winning a World Series, but to our point of hey, it's important for this team to probably get there, you may sacrifice that to acquire prospects that you never see at the big league level.
I'm in agreement. What if they still don't get there and you keep Ryan Helsley and you get no prospects for him, and next year Ryan Helsley is gone for a 75th overall pick?
That's what I was talking about. In that scenario,
you're better off in 26 there than what you are missing the playoffs and getting a 75th overall pick for him.
I don't mind the idea of just settling for the 75th overall pick.
But that really doesn't help you.
And you're not set up as well in that scenario than you would be with those prospects.
Yeah,
you at least have to concede that.
I agree to an extent on that. I still think even if you acquire those arms, look at where their pitching system is now. They are so far behind in what they need in terms of depth pitching wise that I don't even think that it helps them, but not enough to where I think it matters.
I mean, if you get 2 guys that are at the cusp of reaching the major league level potentially in 26, you have to at least admit that helps you.
If you have that extra guy, let's say you had that extra guy for this season.
Roby.
Yeah,
and then you have an extra. Let's say they added this offseason or this deadline for Ryan Helsley, the equivalent of 1 Quinn Matthews and 1 TK Roby. T-Bone, their pitching depth's in a better spot than
Eric Fetty might not be here in that sense because McGreevy has an opportunity to be up here because you got the depth.
They have depth, but it's all unknown, right? I still am taking my shot at the 2025 playoffs. I'm not valuing the 26, worrying about our depth as a whole.
We're arguing over something that I agree with you on, but I have to also be willing to concede some arguments because, if you have the alternative view of you should trade Ryan Helsley, this is the view. The view is you're better set up in 26 and beyond. And it's not just about 26. It's also about 27, 28, 29, etc. And in this scenario, you're giving yourself more outs. I'm saying, hey, TK Roby might never be a big league pitcher. You're right, T-Bone. There's no guarantees of that. Quinn Matthews might never be a contributing member to the Cardinals rotation at the big league level. I have to acknowledge that. Also, these guys that I am acquiring potentially for Ryan Helsley, they may never reach the big league level. But now I've got 4 of them instead of currently having 2 options that can get to the big league level in 26 or 27. And if one of them hits, if one of those guys works out, dude, that's a success. That's what you're looking for is a 25% success rate with these pitching prospects. So I have to acknowledge that. I've got to be willing to acknowledge that. And then it comes down to, how do you value the potential of getting to the playoffs this year? I value it. You value it, T-Bone. I think the fast lane values it, but they see Helsley as not being a significant piece of that, and that's where we disagree. Yeah. I think there's This is one of the more fascinating discussions that any team is going to have in Major League Baseball this year, is what the Cardinals do with Helsley. And I would also say what that means for what you do with Maton, what that means for what you do with Matz and with Michaelis and Fetty. Like, it goes beyond just Helsley, because if you're trading Helsley, don't you then probably just sell all of it and try to get the greatest number of assets possible? Because T-Bone's right. There's no guarantee those prospects in the Helsley trade return works out.
Probably do what the Rays did last year.
So now let's do all of it, get the best return possible for all these guys, continue with the runway for young players, and concede the fact that, yeah, tip your cap, we had a good season, it's not going to be the playoffs for us this year. That's what I think is more likely to happen if they traded Helsley. So I just wouldn't trade Helsley. I'd trade Fetty and Gorman at this year's deadline. If I'm going to trade for my big league roster, those are the two guys that I would really consider personally.
Yeah, I'm with you there. I've hopped back over this fence so many times because it does really feel like you've got to gauge the market to see. Like, you got to do your due diligence if you're John Mozeliak to say, what are teams willing to give? Because if somebody is paying a price that you would never get in any other scenario, as much as you want to taste those playoffs and get that experience, we're talking about an offer that doesn't come around very often and may not ever be there again. So, again, 1 week I hop on the side of like, yeah, you know what? I can't trade him. This team does need to make the playoffs because I do value that. But on the other side of that coin, I also value what the future outlook of this team looks like. One playoff run may give you a little bit of a boost, but missing the playoffs, but also gaining assets might give you a bigger boost 5 years from now.
Yeah, it all comes down to me where you're at in the standings. You're currently 5 games back in the division, 2 games back in the wild card. That to me would be worst case scenario at the deadline, because I don't know. I don't know what you do there.
I think
you're in those shoes. Probably. I think how they're playing would be a big part of that, but I think they probably would buy. That's risky, man, because you're buying for a team that is currently out of the playoffs.
And to be clear, when I say buy, I'm talking potentially like what you're talking about with Fetty and Gorman.
Sure.
Like, I'm using those kind of
a
as
very cautious, style buyer that's not going to give up future assets in order to go on a run. But you're conceding the future assets that you could get for Ryan Helsley in this scenario, which is, at least at that point, it would be a consideration to me. If you're in the playoffs, you cannot trade Ryan Helsley. I think that would be crazy. But if you're back a little bit, that's where the discussion really becomes interesting. And if you're way back, you got to trade him. You got to make that move.
Yeah.
Coming up in 15 minutes, 314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line to get involved in the show. Today is a big day in learning about Matthew Liberatore's development. The Junk Drawer is coming up next here on BK and Ferrario. Hey, it's BK from my friends at Victory Men's Health. It is time for you to unlock your inner champion. The place to do so is at Victory Men's Health. They have 4 great locations across the St. Louis area, one in O'Fallon, Missouri, another in O'Fallon, Illinois, one in Sunset Hills, and the location that I personally attend in town and country. Once you get over there, they're going to be able to help you out with whatever it is that will unlock your inner champion. For some, that's erectile dysfunction issues that they're trying to deal with. Others, it's meeting their weight loss goals, low testosterone symptoms. Guys, it happens, especially those of you that are my age, maybe a little bit older. If you're having those symptoms, low energy, not getting the same amount of oomph out of your workouts, could be due to low testosterone. They can check those levels for you at Victory Men's Health. They also have some vitamin infusion that they can help you out with, red light therapy programs, cardiovascular testing, micronutrient testing labs. All of this is available for you at Victory Men's Health. Book that first appointment today. Super easy process. Put in your name, email, phone number. Tell them BK sent you with 101 ESPN, and they will help you out at Victory Men's Health. Time to unlock your inner champion at victorymenshealth.com. learned something about Alex last night, T-Bone. He is capable of being out beyond 10 o'clock at night. I didn't know it was possible.
I've always been capable of it. Do I prefer it?
We grabbed drinks last night together, the three of us as a show. It's something that we don't do very often, but we decided, you know what? I guess we should pretend like we like each other. So we went out, we grabbed some drinks together, we watched the Cardinals game at the end together, and I'll be damned, T-Bone, Alex was there until 1 a.m.
1:30. Got home at 1:45
on a school night. We kept Alex out until 1 a.m. How you feeling today, dude?
You know what? I'm good so far. Ask me at 5 o'clock when chaos kicks in at my house, because 5 to 7, 5 to 8 o'clock, that's when ish hits the fan. But I'm very capable of this. I just choose not to do this.
It was so funny.
It's not fun.
The first thing that I saw from Alex this morning is he sits down in his chair in the office and just gives a big old yawn.
Well, that was also because I'm on the phone with insurance, which is never fun. Here's the problem. It's like it's a path of disaster when I stay up late. Because when I stay up that late, I get home and you'd think, oh, we just go right to bed. No, that's not how I work.
How late did you stay up?
Another 45 minutes.
Okay, I was up about another hour. Yeah, that's about me too, dude.
And so
wasn't it great?
I'm up that late, and like 5 years ago when I didn't have kids, you know what I did? I'd sleep in a little bit longer. Yeah. But now it's like I can't fall asleep. The girl, my daughter, Adelaide, is standing next to my bed at 6:30, 6:45 in the morning, just tenderly rubbing my face. Daddy, breakfast is ready. I'm like, what did you just burn down?
I mean, that sounds like a pretty great way to wake up, honestly.
It's a wonderful way to wake up, and I love it so much, but it's just also there's no, like, slow process of waking up. It's immediate eyes chaos. Open, what did you just burn down in the house? And you're going out of your room. So it's a disaster path, because then it carries over to the next day. Hell no. I told PK last night, I said, this is probably the first time I've stayed out this late since college.
Is that true?
Probably.
Like on a school night, like a work night.
Are you not counting the draft?
Wait, well, that's what I'm saying. That doesn't involve work.
What? Oh, okay, yeah.
So, like, the draft, we were out for work.
That's fair.
The Stanley Cup Championship, I don't think I slept. That was a 48-hour, like, overnight thing.
We stayed up beyond that.
Yeah.
T-Bone didn't. T-Bone passed out.
Well, and even Alton, I think I went to bed at, like, 12 o'clock still. Like, it's not this late.
I don't know, man. You didn't even get off the air with the Blues broadcast until, like, 10:30, 11. Yeah. And we stayed out.
We're thinking of two different Altons, because my Alton that I'm thinking of was where I pounded the 12-pack of Bud Light when we got back, and I was like,
that one was a little earlier. Yeah. That was a little earlier.
Hold on, why am I being drunk? I definitely did not pass out.
Oh, yeah, you were out the first one. You were on the
first one you were out pretty early.
You were on the couch pretty quick.
No, that is a lie.
The second one was when I was in the fetal position on the bed. Yeah. The first year I was in a better spot.
Last night was voluntary. The last time I voluntarily stayed up that late was in college.
We'll make it a weekly thing.
We will not make it a weekly thing.
We'll bring back Thirsty Thursdays, the adult version.
And you know, we can start doing some events with the listeners. 314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line. We could do, T-Bone has a karaoke bar right by his place. We'll just do like a pop-up BK and Ferrario hanging out with the listeners.
Yeah. Sure. If you know what, if there's interest in that, I will consider it.
Don't sign yourself up for it.
I'll consider it.
Our bosses are looking for new ways
I thought they were looking at us.
To do creative things and maybe bring in a little bit of revenue for the station.
If the listeners want to
sign yourself up,
I will invest into it. Not going to be very often, and it has to be in the summer, because when hockey season's going, you could bleep off on that one. Otherwise, though,
summer brewery tour with BK and Ferrario each Thursday night.
You know what the worst part about it is? You forget things when you stay up that late. So I was supposed to put the grass out this morning, and I forgot. So now I got 2 bins of wet lawn clippings that should have been picked up, and I got to cut the grass later this week.
Earlier this week, we have our trash pickups on Tuesday. Well, our trash pickup, I'm not going to call them out, but you know who you are. They either get there at 7 a.m. or 5 p.m. There's no in between.
Yeah.
Ours is 7 a.m. I'm getting ready to go outside, like start getting my stuff ready for the day, and I see the truck, and it's going by us, and I'm like, God bless it, man.
You run out in your underwear.
For like 3 months in a row, you've been here 5. Anyways, all right, 314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line. In 15 minutes, we'll play a game of More Likely to Happen. You guys give us 2 scenarios. We'll tell you which one is more likely. But next, big day today for Matthew Liberatore. We'll talk about it here on BK and Ferrario. It's a big day for Matthew Liberatore, Alex. I want to see how he's able to respond after the last couple of outings have not gone as well for him. In his first 10 starts, he had a 2.7 ERA. He had 51 strikeouts and 8 walks in 59 innings. That's really freaking good. Regardless of what the expectations were coming into the season, that's a hell of a start to the season for Matthew Liberatore. And then in the last 2, he's only gone 9 innings. His strikeout numbers are fine. Walk numbers are fine, but they're getting a lot of contact against him. The swing and miss is gone over the last couple of starts, especially the most recent one against the Royals. And, Alex, I want to see how he responds to that. 15 hits allowed over his last 9 innings. That's not what you want if you're Libby. This season was all about runway. It was about opportunity. And we've seen guys translate from the bullpen to the starting rotation. And sometimes it goes really well for a while, and then suddenly they hit a wall. We saw this last year with Reynaldo Lopez. He was really good early on in the season, and then there was a little bit of a dip in the performance, and he didn't have the same strength down the stretch that he did early on in the season. I'm going to be really interested to see Jordan Hicks. We saw this with the Giants last year. Got off to a great start, and then, warning signs, this is not going well. He was put into the bullpen again. I don't think we're there with Matthew Liberatore. We're not anywhere close to that, but I want to see if he's able to respond. What does the velocity look like into the 4th, 5th inning today? Is he able to find some more of that swing and miss stuff? Not going to be easy against this lineup. How does he translate some of the stuff that he's been working on? That, to me, is a huge storyline going into this one.
It is. He's at the crossroads point of his season to where it's like, do you take this and you go up with it to where you figure out what's taking place, you have hit that exhaustion, and you were able to push through it and get more from you? Or do you go the opposite direction where it's not working for you, you got to find a way to get him a little bit more rest so that he can reset his mind? And neither of those things are a bad option. Like, if he goes that direction that I'm talking about, downwards, to where it's like, look, this doesn't look good, exhaustion is set in, this is all part of the runway process. This is all part of finding out, like, cool, this is the first time Matthew Liberatore has been a starter from at the beginning of the season, you hopefully until the end of the season. You're going to hit a point, just like Alec Burleson did last year, where it was like, oh, this is what it takes to be an everyday major leaguer. And then you adapt, and you take that into the offseason, you change your workout regime, you change your eating habits, and then you find a way to bring it back the next season. So either way is going to be really good for the Cardinals and for Matthew Liberatore. But in terms of this season, right now, the month of June is it for him, because not saying he's going to lose his job, but you either have a guy who is like a legit 3 upside pitcher or a guy who is going to hit fatigue, and you're going to have to go through a lot of ups and downs with him for the next couple of months.
Yeah, I'm fascinated to see what these next couple of starts look like for him, because if you are hitting a wall with him, it really makes things interesting for what the Cardinals decide to do with him, right? Do you push him into the bullpen because you don't want to just overtax him, right? Like, that is the worst case scenario. Though this is about runway, you also don't want to break a guy that could potentially move back into the rotation next year if this is just hey, he's running into arm fatigue because his arm's not been built up to do this over the last couple of seasons. But the reason I say that I find the next couple starts so fascinating for him is, if that was the case, then you might have to go to, okay, well, maybe we now move McGreevy into the rotation, and now they're back to the spot where they don't want to be, which is, okay, well, now we just burnt our 6th starter in terms of calling him up. Now we don't have any depth back behind us to protect us if we deal with injuries. So it's why it's intriguing to see what he's going to look like. Hopefully it is just the mechanics that he talked about after his last start when he got pulled for fatigue. Hopefully that's just it, and you're going to see him maintain his velocity throughout today's start. That's the number one thing I'm focused on, is does he maintain his velo today, right? Though you want to have a bounce-back start, though you want to see swing and miss stuff from him, my bigger concern is, okay, this velo thing was kind of alarming last time it happened. Is that going to be something that happens again today?
And it's almost exclusively the 4-seam fastball that's getting crushed. In his first 10 starts, opposing hitters were batting .250 with a .340 slugging percentage against Matthew Liberatore's 4-seam fastball. In his last 2 starts, opposing hitters are batting .555 with a slugging percentage of over 1,000 against his 4-seam fastball.
Is that good? What's high score mean?
Really bad. Everything else, every other pitch basically, similar results to what they were early on in the season. Slider is still getting swing and miss. The whiff rate is pretty close. The changeup has still been a pretty good pitch for him. It's actually up in terms of its whiff rate. Sinker's never going to be one that he gets a whole lot of whiff on, but people don't have a hit on it against him in his last 2 outings. He's done pretty well with almost every other pitch. it is the four-seam fastball that has been the problem. It was down in velo over the last couple of starts. That's going to be the pitch that either unlocks his potential and allows him to continue to be the starter that we saw early on this season, or it's going to be the pitch that he's got to continue to find answers for, or he has to find a new answer for that pitch, right? Like, what else can I turn to if it's not going to be my four-seam fastball? What else can I go with instead of that? And maybe some of that is sequencing. Maybe some of that is, hey, the tunneling's not there the way that it was earlier on the season. Maybe I've got a tell on my fastball and people are finding that. Maybe it is purely just the velocity. It's hard to say without being in those meeting rooms what specifically has gone wrong with the fastball. Could be a number of different issues that have led to this, but it's pretty clear where the results have gone off the rails for him, and it's with that four-seam fastball. Did want to talk about one other player real quick before we start today's game. What do you guys make of Nolan Gorman and his recent uptick in production? He seems to own, for whatever reason, Chris Bassett. He's now, I think it's 3 for 3 against him with 3 home runs and a walk yesterday.
Bassett will be a Cardinal just so we can get away from Gorman.
Yeah. What do you make, though, of it's not just against Bassett. Gorman's been good lately, and he's showing the power again. What do you make of this, Alex?
I think it's a confidence thing, but I also think it's, look, he sees the path right now to where he's getting playing time with the injury to Jordan Walker and then now the injury or uncertainty of what it is for Brendan Donovan. It just feels like he's starting to heat up. But to me, this is what Nolan Gorman always is. Like, he'll get hot for about a month, and then we're like, see, this is Nolan Gorman. And then it goes south fast, and then you're like, wait, what just happened? He is a streaky player. Can you take the streakiness and find consistency with it, or can you just capitalize on a roll? Because that might be Nolan Gorman's path to staying in Major League Baseball, or at least with the Cardinals. You're going to have to be a dude who can come off of the bench or come into a pinch hit situation or spell a guy for a couple of days in a week and then go out there and go 2 for 4, 2 for 3 and showcase the power. I like it right now. Right now, Nolan Gorman, this is the perfect chance for you, man. If Brendan Donovan's down for a bit, you know what? Give him a little bit of rest. Jordan Walker's making his way back. Stay in the lineup. Just showcase the reason the same way that they've been doing with Alec Burleson of like, we've got to find at-bats for this guy. Now it's the chance for Gorman. I think at least there's some confidence there.
10 for his last 23 with a double, a triple, and 2 homers. That's pretty good. You like seeing that. T-Bone, what do you make of it?
I'm kind of with Alex. Look, I hope he capitalizes on this runway, but to me, this is nothing more than just a classic Nolan Gorman, like, hot month, right?
Nolan bump.
Yeah, we've seen this from him. He's like a roller coaster. There's a month where you're like, this is the worst thing I've ever seen. Like, he strikes out all the time. And then there's a month where you're like, holy crap, he's figured it out. 800 OPS. He's hitting for that pure power. This might be that month, right? And if that's the case, you got to capitalize on that when you're the Cardinals, right? Take advantage of the month that Gorman could potentially be having. I know it's only been 7 games so far this month, and it even dates back a little bit further than that, to your point. But take advantage of that, right? He's probably got another 20 games where he's going to be hot. Play him in that stretch. And if you really want me to buy into him making significant changes, okay, how quick can you recover when you go back through another slump? Because that's always been his big MO is he doesn't just slump for a week, he slumps for an entire month.
Yeah, if you look at the way that pitching lines up against the Cardinals over the next week or so, in the next 2 series, both Milwaukee and Chicago, you're only going to see, I think it's 1 lefty. So you should see a pretty good dose of Nolan Gorman over the next 7-8 games if you include today. I'm curious to see how he responds. This could be a decent opportunity for him. I don't know that there is a long runway for Nolan Gorman, but hey, capitalize on it while you can. Coming up next, more likely to happen here on BK and Ferrario. 314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line for more likely to happen. You guys give us 2 scenarios. We will tell you which one is more likely here on BK and Ferrario. All right, Alex, let's start out with this. More likely to happen. The Blues end up giving somebody, whether extension or free agency, a 7-year contract this offseason, 7+ years this offseason, or the Blues will not sign anybody via free agency or extension to a long-term deal.
I'll say it's more likely they don't sign anybody to a contract or an extension to a long-term deal. I don't think this is the year they're handing out long-term deals. If anybody's getting a long-term deal, it will be the following year when Alexander Steen takes over.
Interesting.
I don't think Doug's giving anybody a deal until Steen is the one that can kind of
That includes Holloway and Broberg?
Yep. I know people want that, man, but not that I don't believe that it's worth it. I'm not worried that these guys are going to go anywhere. Like, give them another year to see who they really are, and then give them the contract that they deserve.
I'll say they don't hand out a long-term deal as well, because even if they go into the market, I'm thinking like 2-3 years, and that I wouldn't consider that long-term. If you're considering that long-term, then maybe I have to change my answer. But I don't see them going very heavy on length or on term, for this offseason.
I agree with you guys. I do not think they'll give anybody in free agency a long-term extension. I think it really just comes down to, do you believe they will sign one of Broberg or Holloway to those long-term deals? I think my answer right now to that would be no.
Yeah, I think you could see a bridge deal, but if I'm looking at this correctly, I think Doug he's got the team set up for Steen, at least this team, and then when Steen takes over, cool, welcome to the big leagues. You got to make some decisions, and that's where you're going to come to the decision with Broberg and Holloway.
Alex, what do you got for us?
Another Blues one, boys. More likely to happen. A new St. Louis Blue scores 20 goals this upcoming season, or one of Snuggerud, Bolduc, or Neighbors scores 30.
A new St. Louis Blue scores 20+.
I think that's where I am as well. I see them making an upgrade at center. And if you do that, I think it's going to be a guy that's got the potential to get to 20 goals. So I'd say, new Blue that ends up scoring 20 goals.
That's where I'm at as well. I think the new guy can be a 20-goal scorer in that third-line centerman role, because you're talking third-line center with a Bolduc and a Neighbors, if that's the route they go, or you get second-line opportunities with Kyrou or Holloway. There's offense there.
T-Bone?
Guys, more likely to be the Cardinals' number 3 quote-unquote starter post-trade deadline. Eric Fedde or Michael McGreevy?
I don't think Eric Fedde's going to be here post the trade deadline. I think he's going to be dealt. And I think that will happen either if they are a buyer or a seller. I think if you're a seller, you sell Fedde to whoever the highest bidder is for prospects, right? If you're a buyer, I could see them trading Eric Fedde, like either in a deal that nets them something, like the reverse of the Montgomery deal from a couple of years ago, or you just sell him off and then you use parts from your system to go get that thing. I think Fedde is dealt at this year's deadline.
Yeah.
I think you're going to try to upgrade from him, either via a trade or with McGreevy.
I think if they're buying, he'll be here, and they're still trying to upgrade over him. The hard part for me is I don't know if McGreevy becomes a 3 for him.
Agreed.
So I'll say it's more likely that Fedde is your number 3 starter.
Yeah, I would say more likely it's McGreevy, and 3 feels like aggressive. I was just using that kind of as the placeholder. But I'm kind of on the same page as BK. I think he's their... Because I wonder if they're going to be money in, money out again at the deadline, like they were last year. And that's how they got to the conclusion of let's trade Tommy Edman. If they are that again this year, Fedde's the one guy that it kind of makes sense there. You move on from his, at that point, it'd be $3 million of his $7 million still owed to him. I could see where they do that, and then rather than, depending on where they are at in the standings, rather than saying, let's go out and acquire a starter to add to our rotation, it's just as good as acquiring somebody. Typically, that's for a guy coming back from the IL, but this time it's McGreevy coming from Memphis.
314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line to get involved in the show. You guys give us 2 scenarios. We'll tell you which one is more likely here on BK and Ferrario. This one comes from the 314. Guys, more likely to happen, the Blues trade Falk or Kyrou this offseason? I think it's more likely they trade Falk.
I think it's more likely they trade Kyrou. I think they like Falk's play. I think they wish there was more offense, but defensively he's probably right in line with what you'd expect for $6.5 million. I don't think they're going to trade Kyrou, but you've got an opening, and if you want to bring back something in return, like Kerb's mentioned, that's your hockey trade. So I'll say it's more likely they trade Kyrou.
I'll say more likely Falk, because I just don't know if you're getting equal to or better value than Jordan Kyrou. So I would say I would lean towards Falk then.
I also don't think they're going to pay to move Falk, which is the only way you'd be able to trade Falk. Plus, what are you getting in your top 4 on the right side if you move Falk?
314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line. More likely to happen from the 314. Blues trade away a young forward. Talk about Bolduc,
Blues
Snuggie,
trades.
Neighbors. I think a lot of people...
Why? We're not even talking about those.
Blues fans are listening right now because the Cardinals game's on. More likely the Blues trade away a young forward or trade for a young forward. So they trade away Bolduc, Snuggie, or Neighbors, or they trade for a forward that is currently under the age of 26.
Does it have to be one of those 3 young forwards? Because I would lean towards a young forward gets traded away, like a Stenberg or one of their prospects in the pipeline. Like
I could specifically mention that. Yeah.
I can see them moving one of those guys to acquire something in return. I'm not sure how you acquire a young forward because you don't have the assets to do that. Because to acquire a young forward, it would be odd for that team to be willing to take on younger forwards.
Yeah, so I would lean, I'm with you, I would lean towards more likely they would trade away a younger forward to go out there and try and upgrade the center spot.
I think that's my perspective on this as well. There are not a lot of those guys available.
It's really not. Like, we brought up Morgan Geekie, like, because I'm thinking young, you're talking like 26 or younger.
25 or below.
Like Shane Pinto's the one that I brought up, Ryan McLeod. But, I mean, these are guys that will cost you something off of your NHL roster, and are you making yourself better if you're trading a Bolduc for a centerman?
Yeah, a lot of these guys are 28, 29, and then in free agency, you're talking about 30 for the most part with a lot of the guys that are available this offseason. So it's difficult to find who that specific player is, but I don't think they're going to trade one of their young forwards unless something really good comes available, which I'm not opposed to.
Yeah.
Like, if you could find that guy that you think is worth it, cool. Like you mentioned Geekie. That might require you to trade a roster player right now in order to get him.
You're trading a Bolduc or a Dvorsky. And I know he's not roster, but you're trading a young NHL close to ready forward for a guy that's already an established forward.
Are you open to trading Dvorsky in one of those kinds of moves?
It's got to be not for a Morgan Geekie. Like, I would be open to trade Dvorsky for a Matt Barzal, like an Elias Pettersson.
Like a 100% established
25-year-old established top 6 center. Yes, I would be interested because Dvorsky, you hope, becomes that. But I'm not trading him for some project or some unknown still.
I'd agree with that.
I think I'm more open to like lowering the bar for trading Dvorsky, but I do agree. The bar is high. It's just, I don't know. Like, Pettersson set him aside. There's a lot that comes with that, but
I just can't trade Dvorsky. I can't mortgage the potential of what a 10th overall pick could legitimately become for a guy who has put together one good season or 2 good seasons.
314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line. In 15 minutes, we're going to dive into the BK and Ferrario Rewind, maybe react a little bit to what we're seeing in the Cardinals game today. Cardinals up 1-0 against the Blue Jays. They were just able to cash in on Mason Wynn getting on. So Wilson Contreras cashes in that run. Cardinals up 1-0. They have been getting behind early a lot recently, so it's encouraging to see them get ahead early on in this one. It is still incredibly early, just the bottom of the first inning. Coming up next, is Radek Faksa a priority signing for the Blues this offseason? We'll discuss it next year on 101 ESPN.
Alex Ferrari to tell you about my friends out at Classic Air Care who have been making people comfortable taking care of their HVAC systems since 1926. I can give you a great story. I was talking with my buddy a couple of days ago whose HVAC system, they were looking at potentially getting a new one. They have a new home. It's an older unit, and they're like, hey, what's the price look like? And so I told them, I said, call Classic Air Care because what they do is they come out, they'll walk around, they'll check out the unit that you have. And sometimes there's pieces a part of that older unit that are in good shape that can be used. And so what he thought the estimate was for a boatload of money turned out to be saving him a little bit because of some of the pieces that he had on his older unit. And that's what you get with Classic Air Care. You get knowledgeable technicians that when they come out, they check their unit, they explain if there's issues, why there are issues, how to avoid issues, so you know how to best maintain and take care of your HVAC system. So you can give them a call today. Check out their maintenance agreement. It's something I'm a part of that has made 2 very old units last for the longest time. Just do me a favor and tell them Alex Ferrario sent you. It's Classic Air Care and classicaircare.com.
Tanner Hendrickson here with a Sports Center update brought to you by Saliga Heating and Cooling. Cardinals currently in action trying to avoid the sweep against the Toronto Blue Jays. They lead 1-0 in the top of the second inning. We'll keep you updated on the Cardinals game throughout the day today here on 101 ESPN. The Sports Center update is brought to you by Saliga Heating and Cooling, a Daikin heating and air conditioning dealer.
Alongside Alex and T-Bone on BK, so is Radek Faksa a priority for the Blues this offseason? It's a question that I think is going to come into the focus in the near future. Alex, over on the Athletics fan poll, this was something that JR put together. He asked a question: do you want to see the Blues re-sign these free agents? For Ryan Suter, 20% of the responses said yes. Most of the responses said no, do not bring back Ryan Suter. My guess is they look at this and say, hey, we've got Tucker for that spot. Appreciate everything Suter did. This is my personal perspective on it. But we're going to go a different way. It's time for us to let the young guy take that spot. On Faksa, 93% of the responses said, bring back Radek Faksa, re-sign him this offseason. That doesn't necessarily mean they view him as a priority. But, Alex, do you think that is something the Blues need to get accomplished?
So that's the thing. I don't think it's a priority, but I do think it's something that they need to do. Because he was a part of one of the most important lines for the Blues down the stretch last season. That was the WTF line. We have spent so many times on this show arguing over the impact of a fourth line. And I think you saw the perks of having a fourth line that you can use in every situation this past season. Because prior to that, there was not a fourth line to use. You didn't have guys that you trusted taking on Connor McDavid just as much as you trusted taking on the other team's fourth line. They also scored a lot of goals. They were great in the faceoff dot. Faksa was 57% last year and used in the defensive zone a lot to win faceoffs for the Blues, on top of certain guys on the penalty kill. So I do think it is a necessity to get Faksa locked up. And I know a lot of people would say, well, just use Sundqvist on that fourth line. He probably could mimic some of what Faksa does, but he's not as good on the faceoff dot, which is such an important thing when you're that line and you're used in certain scenarios. And I just don't think Sundqvist plays with that same nastiness that Faksa does. So for that line, I would say the way Jim Montgomery used it last year, yeah, I'd like to have that as a certainty for at least the next couple of seasons.
I'm fine with them bringing back Faksa. I've never had any issues with this. It just makes me, it does make me wonder, like, hey, what are you paying him? I'm not doing like $3+ million bucks.
Yeah, that's a huge factor into this, because if he's asking himself out of the realm of possibility, then he's going to walk.
And B, what does that mean for the roster construction? I don't know. I think money has to be in the conversation here. Like, are the Blues, is the ownership group willing to spend well beyond the cap this year? Are they willing to say, hey, Matthew Joseph, you're going to go down through waivers, and that may mean, I think somebody would claim him, but maybe not. And if they don't, you're spending $3 million for Matthew Joseph, cash-wise, not cap, but cash. The ownership group would be spending $3 million for him to play for the AHL affiliate. Is that something that they're comfortable with? Or would they look at Army and say, hey, listen, you traded for this guy. You wanted him on the roster. You chose Matthew Joseph. You chose to have Alexander Texier here. I'm not going to go spend a couple $1 million on Radek Faksa when we have his replacement internally with Oscar Sundqvist. Just put Oscar Sundqvist on the fourth line, and let's go acquire a third-line center for the team. That's where we need to upgrade, is that third-line center from Sonny. If Sonny was good enough to play on that third line for you last year, why can't he now bump down in a less prestigious role and play on the fourth line? And I think that's a fair question, honestly. I agree with you. From an identity perspective, I don't know that you quite get the same amount out of Sonny as you did out of Faksa last year. But am I a better team by bumping Sonny down and going out and acquiring, I don't know, Charlie Coyle to be my third-line center than I was last year? I think, yeah. I think you're pretty significantly improved from where you were a year ago. I think that makes you a lot better. So I would understand if they don't bring back Faksa, and I think a lot of it would have to do with cash, roster spots, and how they view Sonny as that fourth-line center possibly.
Yeah, and the roster spots, like, to me, they'll be fine. One of Texier or Joseph is going to go to the minors. And you're right. You have to answer the question, are you willing to pay? Texier is, what, $2.1 million if he's playing in the AHL, and it's for 1 year, versus Joseph at $3 million. I actually think Texier would be more likely to get claimed off of waivers if you put him through. And frankly, I don't know where Texier fits in with all of the offense you have on the wingers. Texier isn't a fourth liner. So, and then in that sense, you've got your 23-man roster. You can go get your free agent. You've got 2 extra forwards in Joseph and Sundqvist, and you've got your 1 extra defenseman. It really comes down to salary. Are you willing to pay these guys that money and go that much more above where, because you're paying Krug no matter what, but he's going on LTIR. How much more above the cap are you willing to spend? Because if you can make a trade for a guy that's already under contract for 1 year, for 2 years, that's $5 million, $4 million, well, then you're kind of right where you were at last year because you were paying Krug, you were over it because of the offer sheets, so you're not putting yourself in too bad of a situation. But to me, it all goes back to what's Fox asking for, because I'm not paying a fourth-line player $3 million, no matter what. In that sense, Sundqvist is fine on that fourth-line role, and we'll just push through with it. I actually think the ideal role for Sundqvist next year is the 13th forward. To come in, 50% of the season, play center, play wing, work in certain spots, when injuries pop up, but have him fresh for when games matter most.
Ideally, I agree with you.
Yeah.
Like, if they can bring back Fox on a reasonable deal, they can make the money stuff work with Joseph and Texier, and they make it work roster-wise, they're able to manipulate things enough, I think that's ideal. I think Fox is your fourth-line center. Sonny is the 13th forward. You've got one of Texier or Joseph, whoever they choose, to be that extra forward beyond just Sonny. And boom, you go into the season that way. I think Hofer is part of this conversation as well because he's an RFA, and we don't know how this is going to work out with him. I would assume they'll figure out a way to get him under contract.
The wrench in all of this is, does somebody offer sheet Joel Hofer?
Yeah, and then you potentially are paying him, $4 million. And that changes the way that you look at your salary cap situation as well, or the cash situation. Yeah. So there's a lot of different factors that go into this, but the easiest solution is bring back Faksa. You figure something out with Joseph and Texier, and you move on that way. But if they get into a situation where they have to put Sonny on that fourth line, I'd be fine with it.
Yeah.
I don't think, to me, Faksa is any kind of a priority. He is somebody that if I figure out the rest of my roster and I can still make it work with Faksa, I'm making it work with Faksa. He's just not one of the order of operations has him pretty close to the bottom as opposed to towards the top.
Yeah. And that's why I don't like the word necessity, because to me the necessity is upgrading your top 9. Upgrading 100%. That third line center role so that from top to bottom you are a dangerous team. And I think you're more dangerous with Fox on that fourth line, but I can get away with Sonny on that fourth line. The fourth line just plays such a physical role that if I got a guy with 2 artificial legs that I'm not sure he's going to get me through 82 plus games, how impactful can that fourth line be if we're going to the minor leagues to get guys to fill into that spot?
With Alex and T-Bone, I'm BK. Coming up next, we're going to hit the rewind, put a bow on this thing here on BK and Ferrario. With Alex and T-Bone on BK, 101 ESPN has your chance to win or to meet Adam Wainwright at this year's Big League Bash at the Factory on July 27th. You could win 2 tickets to the Big League Bash featuring Waino in concert along with appearances from Cardinals players, Fred Bird, and more, all to support Big League Impact. The winner and guest will receive 2 passes to meet Waino prior to the show. Tickets for the Big League Bash supported by Community America Credit Union are on sale now. Find all of those details and that chance to win free tickets for the Big League Bash and meet and greet passes to meet Waino right now at 101ESPN.com or on your free 101 ESPN mobile app. Cardinals up 2-0. Joel Pozo with a homer in the second inning. Alex, the Cardinals now lead 2-0 against the Toronto Blue Jays. So far, so good for Matthew Liberatore. Through 2 innings, the velo looks really good. This is typically where we would start to see a bit of a decline going into the third, and then really you've seen it in the 4th/5th inning recently. But so far, so good, and so far, so good for the offense, getting a couple of runs on the board.
Yeah, capitalize. I mean, Mason Wynn gets on for a single and then basically steals third because of a wild throw to first base, and Contreras comes through, and then you get the Pozo home run. Again, the Cardinals offense has the clutch factor. The pitching's the side that we're talking about right now. And look, if Liberatore can get some swing and miss stuff and just stay consistent with you, then you're in good shape right now. And I mean, once again, if they win this one, which you hope that they do, stopping snowballs.
If I had told you going into this 6-game stretch against LA and Toronto, they're going to go 3-3. They'll be in every single game other than one. So out of the 6 games, you will be in 5 of them, and even really that last one.
I was going to say the one they were in, they just blew it up at the bullpen time.
If I told you, let's say this one, you're in all 6 games and you win 3 of them, you'd feel like you're in a pretty good spot, right?
Yeah, I mean,
that's 2 quality potential playoff opponents. The Dodgers are a legit World Series contender. We'll see what happens with Toronto, but I think they're a good team, potential playoff contender if nothing less. That's pretty good.
Yeah, well, I mean, even Dan Schulman told us yesterday, like, Toronto was kind of the AL version of the Cardinals. And to go into a series where you were competitive with them all the way through, it's a good spot to be in. Is it ideal? Is it helping you catch the Cubs or put yourself in a playoff spot? Well, no, obviously, but again,
keeps you in range, though.
Yeah, and it stops the snowballs from happening because a Dodgers and a Blue Jays series where you lost both series, I mean, that could have been a lot uglier.
Yeah, I think if you went 3-3 in the stretch and we're in all 6 games, like it looks like they could potentially be, I think that's a win. I mean, it had the potential to really snowball on them, coming off of 2 series losses to the Royals and to the Rangers, 2 bad offensive teams, and you gave up a bunch of runs to them. And then you bounce back and you get good enough pitching against the Dodgers, take 2 or 3 from them. Yeah, I would sign up for 3-3. To your point, I was going to say this. Yeah, it's not about trying to catch the Cubs right now or catch, I think it's the Padres that hold the last wild card spot. Right now, it's about just staying in striking distance, right? You can worry about catching them if you end up becoming a buyer at the deadline or if you eventually do end up passing them. But for right now, it is just, hey, we got to stay in striking range. We can't do like what the Braves just did, which was go 2-8 in a stretch and fell completely out of the playoff race.
Yeah, and like you also have a situation where you're going to have some head-to-heads against your division. Coming up here, you got 4 games against the Brewers, man. Those are huge games head-to-head. The Brewers are playing some inspired ball. They're just calling up one of their top prospects. He's going to start against you tomorrow, so you'll see that on the mound. Kid from the Kansas City area that'll be going up against the Cardinals tomorrow on the mound. He's like 6'7", throws like 102 miles an hour. That'll be a fun one to watch. And the Cubs are finally playing real baseball teams, and it's not going super well for them. They lost 2 out of 3 against Detroit. They lost the first game against Philly, did win last night against Philly. You've got 7 games coming up against them prior to the All-Star break, so we'll find out where they are and how they stack up against the division in the very near future. But right now, it's about staying right around where you're at. Stay around 500, keep yourself 5, 6, 7 games above 500 overall. If you can do that, you're going to be in it as we get closer to the trade deadline, and then they can make their decisions. But it's not ideal. You would have loved to have taken 4 out of 6, win 2 out of 3, win both of these series against the Dodgers and the Blue Jays. But to go 500 against these teams, play overall solid baseball, the offense starting to get back on track. They had gone through a bit of a slump over the last couple of days. You've seen them break out of that a little bit. Those are all encouraging signs, and if Libby can continue what we have seen thus far, important that he continues it, that would be a sign a positive sign in the right direction as well.
Yeah, and you hope that can carry over. Like the offense has continued to carry over. You hope the pitching can get back into that mindset at the early portion of it to where it's like everybody was one-upping each other. You're starting to see at least some of the cracks with the pitching, specifically in that Blue Jays series where they were hitting around Michaelis, hitting around Palante. And look, Palante found his way through it. Michaelis did not. Your bullpen has had the wear and tear on it. You see the cracks. But the fact that your offense it's like duct taping everything right now and you're not worried about it because the offense is so good, that puts the Cardinals in a really good position.
I would like to see them make some changes. We can talk about, I know we'll probably talk about this tomorrow on the Redbird Report, T-Bone. We did it a little bit last week as well. But like this Valade situation, they need to send him down. He should not be a part of this roster once they get into Milwaukee. And this is not a shot at Valade, man. It's just like this. He's not a big leaguer right now. He may be in the future. He's not right now. And you have better alternatives. Thomas Sajaci's role at the big league level with this team is going to be as a super utility guy. He should, in my opinion, be playing in the outfield right now, down at AAA. Get him opportunities. Let's see what it looks like. Because at the big league level, he has chances right now to be in the lineup, especially if you allow him to go out in the outfield a couple of days a week. If not him, Luken Baker has to be up here. He can help you against left-handed pitchers. Teams are attacking this lineup right now with lefties. And it's working because you have so many of them in the lineup and you don't have a threat coming off of the bench as a right-handed bat because they're uncomfortable using Pozo in that role right now. So there's really no role for Barrero. There's really no role up here right now for Valade. I understand why they chose those guys. It's time to switch things up a little bit. I wouldn't be opposed to one of, at least, Baker or Sajaci. I would like both, but if you just want one, cool. And then personally, I would say bring up at this point in time Ciani as well. If you're going with one of them, I would go with Ciani and then Baker or Sajaci. Because that allows you to pinch hit potentially for Victor Scott late as well. And then you could use Ciani as that defensive replacement so you don't put in a bad defender in center field late in these games. If you were to tie it, for example. I think it just allows more flexibility for you coming off of the bench. And right now, that is a real limitation for them.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I'm open-minded to the idea of bringing up Ciani because of the explanation that you laid out there. You don't lose a step defensively when you do pinch hit. But I think it is very telling, and I'm 100% with you on the need to kind of change up this bench. They're going up against a lefty today. And we know, ideally, they would prefer not to have Gorman and Burleson in the lineup today. They've got both of them in the lineup today, right? Like, that's very telling as to where you are and what clearly your manager thinks of those right-handed bench bats, right? Of, hey, the guy's role is to hit against lefties. Well, he's not starting today. I think that's very telling that the manager's trying to send a message towards the front office.
He's Alex, that's T-Bone, I'm BK. It's BK and Ferrario here on 101 ESPN. We will talk to you guys tomorrow at 11 a.m. The Fast Lane has you taken care of from 2 to 6 right here on 101 ESPN.